All right. Yay. Hello, everybody. Hi. It is time to talk about Violet Evergarden. I just finished the second movie, watching it for, I don't know, the third or fourth time. If you are in the US, happy Veterans Day. I wanted to do this today, not only because I have today off of work, because it's Veterans Day here in the United States, but it seemed appropriate to do this live stream on Veterans Day because Violet is a veteran. So it felt highly appropriate to do so. Hello, Ray. So I got the chat going on. Hello, Uncle C. Davis. Hello. So it felt appropriate. I got my notes pulled up here. I took lots of notes in preparation of this. Like I said, I just finished watching the second movie, the official movie, over again. Oh, and nearly cried again with the dang Eurus plot. But yeah, so we're gonna talk about Violet Evergarden. I can't believe that I'm done with the series. I still have the light novels to read, and I'm gonna talk about that in the live stream here. But thank you all for joining. If you can't make it to the live stream, it's okay. I'm recording this, so it will be up later to watch. But as per usual, whenever I finish a series completely, I do a live stream. And so we got lots of stuff to talk about. I'm going to ask you guys like your thoughts about things with the series, about the characters, with everything. I want to rank the episodes and piss everybody off. And then just talk about the characters, the themes, everything. So yeah. Oh, Just Davis. Okay, cool. Just Davis. Gotcha. Gotcha. I never know with usernames if there's like a specific thing people want to have them called or whatnot. So, all right. But yeah, happy Veterans Day if you're in the US. If you're not in the US, then happy Thursday or Friday, depending on your time zone. And yeah, let's talk about Violet Evergarden. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, y'all. I This series just coming out of nowhere. Coming out of nowhere, this series. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. There we go. It's yeah. I Okay, so Davis, looking at your chat there, hello. The light novel being different from the series. Yeah, I definitely want to at some point go back and read the light novel. I'm reacting to a lot of series at the same time right now, and I'm kind of going through the manga with certain series and the light novel. I definitely want to get my hands on an English translation of the light novel for Violet Evergarden because I do want to read it. I've heard it's different. I heard especially I was told that the ending, I was told on Patreon that the last movie that just came out is anime only specifically, and that it does not quite follow the light novel at all, which is fine. That gives me excitement to read the light novel eventually and see how it's different. We'll talk about the movies. I know I'm recording this before those of you on YouTube see my reaction to the second movie, which this was the best time to do the live stream, so I apologize. But let me say first and foremost, the second movie is maybe my favorite. I love it. I love it. We'll talk about it. My romantic heart is full watching the second movie. And like I just said, I just finished watching it again. I think I've watched the second film 4 times since I've reacted to it. And it's just as good every time. But we're going to talk about that. So I want to talk about in this live stream my impressions of the series, about the themes, about the characters. We're going to talk about shipping. There's not a crazy amount of shipping in Violet Evergarden, but it's really good shipping, the ones that we do get. And then I want to talk about the movies. I want to rank the episodes and the movies and the OVA, and then talk about the series that I'm going to be watching after Violet Evergarden, as usual. So yeah, the adaptations always tend to be very liberal. Hello, NL. Interesting. Yeah, Kiyoani's adaptations. Nice. So I'm guessing that's all across the board. I know Free is not really based off of anything except a commercial, so they don't really have any source material to go off of. It's kind of like an actual anime original. But I've watched Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. I've watched the first season of that, and it's fine. Hello, and it's fine. I like Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. It's cute. But other than that, other than Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, and other than Free, Violet Evergarden was the third thing that I've watched from their studio. And I have seen the movie A Silent Voice, and that movie speaks to my heart. And I just found out it's Kiyoani as well, which makes total sense. It's gorgeous. But yeah, so let's talk about Violet Evergarden. Let's talk about this series. And y'all in the live chat, I've got the live chat pulled up here. I've got my notes pulled up over on the side here to look at. And if you guys want to just chime in anytime. Hello, Marion. Yay. But y'all, when here's the thing with Violet Evergarden. I've had this series, I have Netflix, and it has popped up. The thumbnail had popped up for months before watching this series. I kept seeing the little thumbnail of Violet in the corner of my screen, and I always wondered what in the world it was about. I was like, maybe I'll eventually watch this series. I'm not going to watch it now. And then when I had the last poll, y'all voted for it, which I was really happy and excited about. But here was my first impressions. Before I even watched the series, I thought that it was something to do with like the Civil War or Civil War era, like the 1800s. I thought it was actually historical, but I thought it was historical, like in reality. I didn't know it was a made up country and that it was just like based off of something else. I had no clue. So I thought it was about the Civil War era. I'm like, oh yeah, it's just about that. And I thought that it would be about Violet being a girl that lost someone in the war, which she kind of did. And that I didn't expect her to be a soldier, or I didn't expect the story to really be about her coming to terms with losing Gilbert and about the connection to the letters, about grief. I had no clue about any of that. I thought it was just going to be a historical anime. And Daniel Pardo, I'm looking at the chat right now, thought it had something to do with gardening. This is a gardening anime. Oh my gosh. Little did we know it was all about flowers and Nakama and the friends we made along the way. That was the whole point of the series. Which really, it had to do with flowers. So I guess you're not wrong with that. And thank you. Okay, yeah, but I knew it was Kiwani, and when I got done with Free, I was like, I love the animation from Kiwani Studios. It's top tier. It's absolutely gorgeous. I've been so stunned by how beautiful this series was. It's almost to the point where you almost feel bad watching it because you feel like you should be giving them more money, right? I feel watching this series, I've watched it through Netflix, and I'm like, I need to give them more money because this series is so gorgeous and they've spent so much time on it that I almost feel like I'm not worthy watching it because I'm like, these animators put their heart and souls into this piece. And it's so beautiful, and the soundtrack marries so perfectly with it that when you're watching, you just feel like reacting to this series was hard because I wanted to stop every few seconds and just stare at the screen and just take it all in and soak it in. There were a lot of moments, especially during the second movie, that you could have just stopped the frame. And I'm like, I need to save that image to make it a wallpaper. And I had to stop myself. Like, you're like, no, you have to keep watching. So yeah, Ray, I agree with you in the chat that before watching, I didn't really even think, I thought the war was involved, but I didn't think she was a soldier. I had no clue that she was a soldier, that it would be about her relationship with Gilbert. It would be about her coming to terms with grief. I had no clue that these topics were even going to be discussed. And to be honest, throughout the first couple of episodes, I was like, oh, this series is good. This is really good. I like this series a lot. And then when it got to episode 6, that's when I kind of fell in love with the series because we'll talk about this, but Leon's story with her, I was like, oh, and then post episode 6, it just all ramped up from there and was gorgeous. And I cried. I'll be honest with y'all. And I've said this in the reactions and I've said this with other shows, but I'm not a very emotional person watching a show. It takes a lot for me to cry. It does. Like I can watch people getting their heads blown off and stuff happen and it not affect me. But for some reason, this show, I've cried more watching this show than I have anything else I've ever watched or anything else I've ever read. I've sobbed more watching this show than anything I've experienced. And I can't explain it. It's just there's something raw and emotional and it just cuts to your core. And I think that the show's whole point was that each episode, they're like, we're going to find some audience member to make cry. We're going to find something that gets an audience member crying with this episode. If this episode doesn't do it, the next one will. And it just kind of ramped up from there. But all right, let me look at the chat here. Davis, the roses in the final movies, the rain scene on the island. Yeah. Anytime that Kiwani could show off with water, because I've watched Free, I love Free, and from the show Free, I was like, okay, Kiwani can animate water. That's like their specialty. They're like, if you want an ocean scene, you call up Kiwani and be like, I need this. And yeah, there were several moments where it was so photorealistic, the rain and the water, that I was like, Kiwani, come on. like you're just showing off at this point. Exactly. But yeah, I like Sokka, you saying that the show is about post-war. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this on Veterans Day here in the US at this holiday, because it's really a big, and we'll talk about the theme about war and peace and the post-war you know, reintegrating into society. I really thought this show went a lot deeper with its concepts than I originally thought on the surface. I had no clue it was going to get this involved in talking about grief and war and the concepts of coming back into society after the war is over. Like, there's not a lot of anime that I've watched that really delve into those topics. You see usually like it's during the actual conflict. You don't see the aftermath's like the last episode, and then you're like, oh, I guess everything will be okay. And then you watch this show and you're like, no, these characters are really suffering and really struggling and having to come to grips with how do you pick up the pieces and move on, if that's even possible? Because for a lot of characters, it's not possible. And so it's really, really, everybody gets off today. So thank you for coming in. It's going to be recorded. So it says my connection's unstable. So I'm like, fingers crossed, y'all, that it stays okay. Fingers crossed that my connection stays okay. It's raining outside. So it's like, of course it's raining outside. It like fits with Kiwani's theme, right? Right. And then NL, there are two types of creators, those that want to make their audience laugh and those that want to make them cry. Yeah, no, I feel like this show did a good balance of both. It didn't ever feel like it was trying to well, at times, yeah, it felt like it was trying to make us cry. Like it was just trying to make us feel horrible. But I don't feel like it was ever to the point where I couldn't watch anymore. I would just have to sob for a while and then go back to it. But yeah, so I want to talk about the themes, characters, ranking the episodes, doing all of that. So, like I said, the animation, the soundtrack, I've seen a picture of the second movie soundtrack online, and I think post Christmas, when I maybe get some gift cards or something, I might go back and buy the soundtrack just for the cover of Gilbert and Violet. I think just to put the cover up, I think I might do that. But yeah, we need to talk about this film, talk about this series as a whole. Just so good. It completely blew my expectations of what to expect with this show. And by the end of it, I wanted more. I was satisfied with the ending of the second movie. I was very satisfied with it. I felt like it ended on a great note, but I still wanted more. And that's a sign of a good series. When a good series decides it's going to go out on top and just end where it needs to, and it doesn't keep going out till it fades away and burns out, that's a sign of a good series, when it knows to go out on top while you're still riding that high. And every time I watch it, and I've rewatched the series and I've rewatched the second movie several times, and it still feels fresh and it still feels good. And you feel like you're just riding a wave, and then it just kind of ends and you're like, I want to get back on the roller coaster again. It's really, really good. But yeah, hi, Daniel. The soundtrack's become my go-to study playlist. Yeah, as a physics major, oh my gosh, yeah. You need like a calming, motivational soundtrack like this, especially if you're doing physics. I'm an English major, so my side of the brain is all English oriented, and humanities side, the math and science side, I'm like, I gotta work for it. So, but all right, so there's a lot of themes in this movie. I want to talk about themes, and as you all chime in, I'll come back and forth with the chat. But yeah, so I didn't expect this movie to tackle the theme of grief like it did. The good solid chunk of the second half of this series was just talking about grief and how do we deal with it? What do we do? Like going through the 5 stages. And I originally thought that from episode 7 on, it was dealing with the 5 stages of grief. Like each episode would deal with a stage. And because if you think about it, it'd be like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then you'd have 12 and 13 to round it out. And that's kind of what happened. But each episode kind of encapsulated all 5 stages at once, just in a different way. And so that was really interesting. But oh my gosh, episode 7 and 10, I feel like if you're going to cry with any episode, it's going to be episode 7 and 10. And several of you have commented saying episode 10 is the episode that gets everybody. If you've been strong and you've made it through every episode, when you get to episode 10, that's the one that's going to break you. And I completely agree. If you don't at least feel sad or some kind of emotional reaction to episode 10, are you human? I don't know. But it's just, I like that Violet is our audience. Violet is an audience surrogate throughout this. We follow her in her journey, but she's also the audience member that we follow in terms of relating to this grief, because Violet kind of goes from being this cold and emotionless. It's not that she's cold and emotionless at the beginning of the series, but she doesn't properly know how to express. She's kind of in shock after losing Gilbert and after that battle at the Intense. And so she doesn't know exactly what to do. And so it's kind of following her like post-conflict, post-battle. How does she how does she move forward in her life and start to reintegrate into society and become a human again? Because, and we'll talk about the theories of war and peace and all of this, but during the war, she really kind of had to become cold and emotionless to do the things that she did. She killed people. And so to do that, you kind of have to cast aside your humanity. And she almost became like a mindless tool just to in those moments. And Gilbert was the only kind of human anchor that she had. And then post all of that, she slowly starts to come back around to society and reintegrate into it and realize, oh no, she is human. She has these emotions. What does she do with this, post that? So the coming to terms with grief, that was just such a major part of the series, and just the different ways that people deal with different types of grief, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, whether it's a spouse or a partner. It all just was very, very well done. And so, and the idea, if there's any type of media that's going to promote peace and be anti-war, I think it's this series, because yeah, this whole series is just talking about, what I liked about it was that even the opposite side of Leiden, the opposite side that we saw with the soldiers in episodes 8 and 9, and then getting into movie 2, you got to see that both sides, you get to see why both sides are fighting, and that both sides suffer because of the war. Even when there's a victor at the end of it, both sides suffer. Like Violet lost Gilbert, Hodgins, had to read Hodgins and Dietfried. I finally got Dietfried's name right. Thank God. Netflix kept calling him Die Hard throughout the entire series until the final movie. I'm like, okay, you finally got your subtitles fixed. And all of you were sitting there like, you're saying his name wrong. I was like, dang it. My brain is like, once it gears and figures out how to pronounce something, it thinks that's the correct way until I literally have to train myself otherwise. So Dietfried was like a big push to get his name right. But yeah, so this whole, I feel like, yeah, nobody came out of the war okay. Hello, Nuclear Gandhi. Hello. As your username is appropriate. Yeah, nobody came out of this war okay. Everyone suffered because of it. And I think by the time episode 11 finishes and Violet's like, I don't want anybody to die anymore, that's such a message with the whole show, in the problems with war and the problems with conflicts like this, that people die on both sides. And in the second movie, when Gilbert's on that island, and by the way, this live stream is full of spoilers. So if you've not seen the second movie, apologies, but it's going to be spoilers for the whole series in this live stream discussion. And the movie reaction, the second movie reaction, is going to be on next Wednesday. But I'm just doing this a little early. But I've already seen the second movie. So, but when Gilbert's on that island and they say that all the men left and nobody came back, it's like, yeah, these people were technically the enemy in Gilbert's eyes during the war, but they also saved him and took care of him. And now he's kind of feels indebted to them. And that whole line when the little kid's like building the little pile of sandcastle there, and he's like, I just wish everybody from Leiden would die. And you see Gilbert just sitting there saying nothing. It's like, well, of course those kids would think that, like, because of him and that side, their family is destroyed. So it's just an interesting reminder that no matter what the conflict is, anytime that there's war, there's going to be suffering from all angles. And I like that this show didn't necessarily pit one side as the end all be all bad guy. There's bad people on both sides. And we do see more people, I think, that are bad on the is it Garrick? I always got their names wrong, but on that side of it, because they were against Violet. But at the end of the day, it's like both sides are kind of at fault. And so I like shows that focus on there not being like a clear victor, a clear good side. Like everybody kind of is human in this show, and you can kind of see from all angles with it. But I like the idea at the very end of the series, though, that Violet's whole deal is saving people. She decides she's not going to kill people anymore. She's going to save them through writing her letters. And that's the great thing. I've wanted to write so many letters since watching this show. This show just makes you want to pick up a pen and paper and just sit down and write a letter. Like it's the most amazing thing. And I had family. My grandfather served in World War II. And back then in the 1940s, you didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have a telephone. So he and my grandmother, they wrote letters back and forth to each other. And she saved all of those letters. And watching this series reminded me of that. And it was kind of beautiful because you could see that communication and that connection between them. It was wonderful. And I feel like Violet finds that way to move forward and to kind of regain her own humanity and anchor herself through writing letters for others. And it's so beautiful watching this show to see how much she grows. It's like you start out the series and she's so like emotionless and kind of like a doll. Like they keep calling her a doll throughout the series. In the first episode, yeah, she's kind of like that. But then as the series goes on, she just develops more and more. And you're like, oh no, she's a person and she has feelings and she wants to reconnect with everybody and she wants to find a way to find purpose with her life. And without Gilbert, she's like, what do I do? And writing those letters becomes her purpose and her way to connect others together and sort of, in a way, redeem herself from the conflict and kind of atone. She's like, I'm going to help these people connect. Since I destroyed so many connections, I'm going to help people connect in other ways too. So I think that's really beautiful. Gardick. Thank you, Davis. Gardick was the aggressor in this. That's a good way to put it. So there's that theme of grief and there's that theme of like war and peace and moving forward. I also like that a lot of characters that Violet interacts with are veterans. Like she interacts with Spencer, who is clearly a veteran that's come home after the war and hasn't found purpose either. And I like that she interacts with him early on in the series, that he can be a reminder of that there are others that connect to her and feel the same thing. I like that. And then later on, she gets to talk to Aiden in episode 11, which is just such a gut-wrenching episode. And Aiden's a reminder of kind of Aiden and Spencer are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, right? And then Hodgins. I'd say that Hodgins, Aiden, and Spencer are kind of your connectors to post-war veterans. Like Hodgins was a veteran and he was able to move forward in probably the most positive way, creating the Postal Service and taking it over and doing the auto memory dolls business. And then you have Spencer, who kind of is struggling, but he still made it home to his sister, and there's still a family link there. And then you have Aiden, who's on like the worst end of the spectrum, where he's not able to see his family again. So Violet's like his only connection back to them. So it's really interesting, all of those different ties that she gets to experience along the series. But speaking of that connection to others, you also have the idea of like found family and all the bonds, like the Postal Service and the auto memory dolls, they kind of become Violet's found family because she's an orphan. The relationship between her and Hodgins, we'll talk about Hodgins, but I absolutely love that he became like a father figure to her. The Hodgins became like a dad to her, and that he kind of, Gilbert entrusted her to him, like if something had happened, and Hodgins kind of begrudgingly took her on. And then as the series develops, you just see Hodgins grow more and more attached to Violet and start getting more and more overprotective of her, like a father figure. And it's like, I love it. So Davis, you said in the chat here, like Catalea. Yeah, Catalea, she was a dancer and she watched young soldiers go off and never come back. Yeah, so it shows that even someone that's not a soldier, even someone that's a civilian, they see the effects of war and they see what it does to families and to the community around them. And she can relate too, that she has the same scars as well. I also like that idea, the idea in the series of burning, and then we go back to episodes 8 and 9, where Violet is literally on fire, and it just shows like just that she can't, those scars and everything that have developed from war, she's trying to snuff out that flame that war has created. And then in episodes 12 and 13, we see that the commander from the Gardic side, he can't let go. He can't move forward. Everything keeps coming back. And he's like, when I went home, I thought it would get better. But since we lost the war, we just kept on suffering. And he's like, this feeling's not going away. He's like, how do I snuff it out? How do I move on? And it's such a heartbreaking moment because Violet's like, well, I've found a way to move on, but my way isn't necessarily going to work for you. So it's really tragic. What do you do for these characters? Gil, I love that your name's Gil in this. Yeah, Hodgins' character. And I also have to say, and we'll talk about Hodgins' character here in a minute, but I'm a big fan of his voice actor. His voice actor is obviously, Hodgins' voice actor is the same voice actor as Dio from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which I've only seen a little bit of JoJo's. I know enough about the references, but I've not watched the series except for like the first couple episodes. But he's also the voice of Adam from Skate and Skate the Infinity. And I love Adam's character. He's like such a great antagonist. And so hearing that voice, it's such an iconic voice. It's kind of like Suda, who voices Damien in this. It's an iconic voice. And then obviously Gilbert's voice actor is also the same voice actor as Okawa from Haikyuu. And it's like my heart, but we'll get into those characters later. So there's that. And if y'all chime in the chat, I'm sure that anything that y'all think of that I'm forgetting as we go along. But the idea of technology, that was the big thing with this whole series, and the idea of letter writing. Because when we think about it, it's easy for me to say, like, I want to sit down and write a bunch of letters, but then my handwriting is also awful because I've typed so much over the years. But the idea of communication and staying connected, that's really what's at the heart of this. Because by the time you get to the second movie, when the second movie started and they introduced the idea of the phone, I was like, oh, this is going to be like a big plot line. And it's going to be this like melancholy thing where the era of letter writing is ending because we're introducing technology like the phone. So people aren't going to write letters anymore. It's going to put the auto memory dolls, make them obsolete. And by the end of the movie, you kind of get that impression that the auto memory dolls have. But the hopeful thing is by the end of this, Iris and Catalia kind of talk about it, in that even if the auto memory dolls and letter writing becomes obsolete, there's going to be other work for them. They will adapt and move forward because they're human. They're going to be able to adapt, and maybe they'll become people that connect people, because that's really what Iris ends up doing in the movie is for Eurus, is that she connects him to Lucas. And in that moment of urgency and desperation, a letter wasn't going to be fast enough. And luckily, they had the technology that Eurus could reach Lucas and talk to him before he died. So yeah, nuclear, we'll talk about this, but Iris really had a great story arc. And I love that the final movie kind of brought her character full circle. And we'll talk about Iris too when I get to the characters. But yeah, I love that. I was like, oh, so we're not framing technology advancing as a bad thing. It's just as part of life. And that kind of goes into the idea of time moving forward in this series. And it was a little jarring seeing us move forward like an Anne storyline and with Daisy. I felt really sad because by the time we get to Daisy's storyline, I was like, oh, Violet's probably gone by now. And that's really sad when you think about it, but it's an inevitability. It's like you can have the existential crisis about it, but inevitably time does move forward and keeps moving on. And so it's just a sign that things can keep progressing and adapting in a good way, even when those people that first influenced it are no longer there. And I think when Daisy has that conversation with the postman on Escarte, when she has that conversation with him and he does like the thumbs up, and I have a theory about him. We'll talk about that with the movie. But I have a theory about him. But when she talks to him, it's like, even though Violet's no longer physically there, the remnants of everything that she influenced still is, like the stamp, the post office, the fact that people still talk about her and all the things that she did. Like her legacy is still present. Like all the good that she did is still carrying on, and others are living up to those same expectations. It's really nice. I like it quite a lot. Let me look at the chat here. Gil, I wonder what Violet's handwriting is like. Yeah, I'm assuming it's actually probably pretty good because she has a mechanical arm. So I'm sure she can control everything really well. It's probably nicer than most people's, I'm assuming. Yeah, Eurus. Oh, we'll talk about Eurus. Crying infinite amount of tears. And then Davis, my book club did a book called Dead Letters, where we talked about how you express feelings in a letter. That is really cool. Yeah, and that's the thing about communication. The one cool thing about this is that in this world, there's all these different countries, but they're all able to talk back and forth. And that is the one good thing that I like, that our own technology, if we're talking about the real world, has developed, because I'll get comments on YouTube videos in a different language, and I can only speak English fluently. I studied Spanish, but my Spanish is horrible. It's really bad. And so I'm not fluent really in any other language, but because we have technology, like translating technology, I can take a comment someone's wrote in another language and I can translate it and then reply back in that same language. Even though I don't know it, I can write something down and translate it into their language and then post it in the reply. And that way, because I'm an English major, but I'm a big fan of respecting language and culture. I think that one of the biggest things in history that has kind of been detrimental is that throughout history, we've destroyed languages. And if you want to destroy a culture, you destroy their language, right? You destroy their way of communicating. That's the thing. If you want to destroy a culture, you destroy the way that they communicate. And if they can't communicate, then you don't have a culture anymore. And so I'm a big proponent of, if somebody responds to me in their native language, I want to respond back in that native language because it's respectful and because I'm like, okay, that's your culture. So I try to translate it, but I'm like, the fact that we have that technology that can do that, I think says something really cool, that technology has advanced in a positive way, that we can still communicate across cultures and across languages. I think that's really neat. But yeah, It's sad to think, Nuclear, I'm reading your comments, sad to think that Violet would one day die, but it's heartwarming to see the good she's done. Yeah, it's always sad to think of characters dying, especially within the shows themselves that they're in. It's always sad because when you especially read something fictional, you expect those characters to be immortal almost. You expect them to always carry on. But this series does not shy away from the fact that people are mortal. Lucas, you are not late. You're joining us just in time. We're just talking about themes. Hello. But yeah, it's neat that this show focuses on people's mortality and just how precious life is. That's one thing about this show too. This show is like such an affirmation of the importance of life and communication and love. That's the big thing. Like I watch some grim shows on this channel. I watch some grim, like dark shows on this channel. But if I'm honest with y'all, I'm a big softy romantic at heart. And so this, obviously the second movie, I was like fangirling out of my seat. But I'm a big softie at heart, and so I'm a big romantic. And so anytime that the show does that, I'm like, okay, you're tugging my heartstrings. Even shows like Attack on Titan that I'm watching, I'm looking for the romance angle. I'm like, is there romance here? We'll see. But yeah, Davis, you said when it comes back to what Hodgins says at the end of episode 9, how our accomplishments. Yeah, we're gonna talk about episode 9. I love the end of that episode where he like cries because of her, when she's like, do I have a right of existence? It's like, yes, everyone has a right of existence, and it's finding that purpose. I love it. Gil, do you like the OST? The soundtrack's gorgeous in this show. The soundtrack and the animation, it pairs so well, and there's so many moments in this show where the soundtrack just elevates the moment. And like when there's a sunset and a big swell of orchestral music, it's so wonderful, and you just get caught up in the soundtrack. If there's a particular soundtrack, I'm not very good at remembering soundtrack names and titles. I'm actually awful at remembering song names. It's one of the worst things I'm at. Like somebody's like, oh, did you hear this song on the radio? I'm like, what does it sound like? And then they start singing it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that song. But here's the thing. In the second movie, the moment when the end credit theme starts playing as the sun is going down and Gilbert's reading her letter, that moment is probably one of my favorite moments in the whole series because it's so perfect. Like you realize in that moment that it's getting to the climax, to the end of the series, and that soundtrack with the sunset and him running towards her and like the music swelling. It's so good. And Davis, yes, I did listen to Sincerely. Oh, so good. It's so good. Her voice is angelic. I love it. I love it. The Legacy of Violet Evergarden. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I need to look up the actual song soundtrack names and listen to the soundtrack all the way through, and then just see which tracks are called what. And oh my gosh, the movie version mix is it's so good. It's just that moment, it just swells at the end. And it's almost like they've been saving the ED for that one moment in the movie this whole time. They've just been saving it. They're like, oh yeah, this is the ED song. You know, it's great. It's like memorized. It's ingrained in my brain now. Whenever I hear that end credit, I'm like, oh, Violet Evergarden, the episode's ending. But then when you hear it in the movie in that moment, you're like, oh, it's just so good. It's so good. So yeah, the other big theme in this series is about love. Obviously, it's about love. But what I love about this series is that it is not just romantic love. It's not just sexual love. It's not just that. It is all different forms. And what I thought this show did masterfully is portray love in all of its various iterations. I absolutely adore that. Because at the beginning, when you're watching Gilbert and Violet together, you're like, okay, she's a kid. This isn't romantic love, right? And then as you watch the series and you see like the story between Charlotte and Damien, you see the stories between Oscar and his daughter, you see the story between Leon and his mother, between Anne and her mother, and you see this like Iris and her parents, Iris and the man that she had the unrequited love for. Like you just see all these different relationships, and you realize that the show, when it says, you know, the whole phrase, I love you, yeah, there's a romantic connotation with that, obviously. But the whole phrase, I love you, is repeated over and over again in this show. And there's all the different versions of it. Like it's a familial love, it's parental, it's a sibling love, like between Amy and Taylor, between Eurus and his brother, Sion. You have Benedict and Hodgins, their relationship, their friendship, Catalia and Hodgins, like the idea that all these relationships and love doesn't have to mean romantic or sexual. It can be platonic, it can be friendship, it can be family, friends, siblings, like all across. The idea is that you want to just be love and express love. And how you do that doesn't matter. The fact is that you are loving someone and sharing that emotion with them, regardless of what it is, of what the connotation is. And so I absolutely adore that in this series. That was the point where by episode 7, I was like, oh, okay, this is the big theme with this series and how we love others. And I'm like, I adore it. I'm all for it. I was like, by that point, I was hooked. By episode 6, I was hooked on this series. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But yeah, the themes in this series are so well done, and they went a lot deeper than I expected. And the conversations the characters have, the emotionality, because I'm a character driven person. Like in stories, it can have a great plot and that's like icing on the cake. And it can have like an interesting setting or an interesting theme or symbolism. But characters are what I watch a story for and read a story for. I read it for the characters because I want to relate to them. I want to understand them. I want to find connections between them and myself. And I feel like this series, the characters that it doesn't have a lot of characters, but the characters it does have, I feel like all of us can relate to them in some way or another. And that just kind of makes us drawn to the series and connect to it even more. So I really like that. I absolutely love it. So before I move on to characters, do you all have any other things with the themes you want to talk about? I'm looking at the chat here. If we've got anything else with those. But yeah, the theme of love, loss, grief, the idea of war and peace, moving on, finding your place post-war. Like, I think all of those, I've read a lot where people have said that they've had veterans watch this show. And I'm like, oh, absolutely. I can instantly see that, because I could feel like somebody that has been, in a war or been in any capacity of that would understand what these characters are going through, especially Violet, and us going through her story as well. So it's really interesting. But yeah. So, the theme of Benedict being a fashion icon. Oh my God. Yeah, we're going to talk about Benedict. He's pretty high up there in my characters. Benedict, man, crossing the thresholds, his fashion, just crossing gender boundaries, whatever, like historical, being the ultimate fashionista of this series. I freaking love Benedict, and we're going to talk about him. I'm glad you bring him up. He's like number 3 on my characters to talk about. Benedict, my soul. We're going to talk about Dietfried too. We're going to talk about Dietfried and Hodgins and the second movie. Mwah, mwah. Just Hodgins making a great dad. I love in the movie that Hodgins, at first he's like, I don't need a daughter because daughters are so much trouble. And then when the boys play the trick on him with the praying mantis, he's like, I don't want a son either. It's like, you're screwed either way, Hodgins. You're going to be a great dad either way, but you're screwed. Benedict is beautiful. We'll talk about him. And then I Has Magic. Hello. I also love how the series touched on the concept of rejection and fear of love. Yes, like how Violet didn't feel like she deserved it through episodes 8 through 11, and how Gilbert felt the same during the movie. Oh my gosh, that's such a great point. And we kind of get foreshadowing of that, right? We get foreshadowing of that with Iris back in episode 4. We get foreshadowing of that moment because Iris goes through unrequited love with the guy that she had feelings for, and he did not have feelings back for her. And so we see, I felt so, I could relate to Iris so much, because I think all of us have probably had someone we care about and it's not reciprocated in the way that we wanted it. And so in that moment with Iris's character in episode 4, I was like, oh, so we're going to touch on unrequited love. And I was afraid for a while that was what was going to happen with Violet. That was she was going to get to Gilbert and it was going to be like, ugh. And then Gilbert, like you said, I Has Magic. Gilbert has like a fear of love angle where he feels like he has so much guilt. He feels like he's hurt Violet and caused her so much pain that he feels like he's undeserving of her love. He's like, no, I've done all these awful things to you, and I treated you like a tool, even though I said I wouldn't, and I don't deserve, like I don't deserve your love. And Violet on the other end is like, no, I love you unconditionally. You think you've done these things, but you've been my anchor through all of this. And so it's just, they finally get the chance to communicate at the end, which is important. But yeah, the idea of the fear of love, of being rejected, and or of having that love never expressed. That was my one thing. We'll talk about the movie towards the end of this. And I know the movie's kind of conflicting for some people, and we'll talk about it. But I was afraid the whole series that her letters would never reach him, and that I was like, she's never going to know how she felt about him. That was my biggest fear in this series. Was like, and I kind of resigned myself to accepting it by the end. I was like, okay, well, she's writing these letters to him. He's never going to know. It's just, she's writing the letters, and maybe he, you know, if you believe in the afterlife and that he's looking at her, watching down on her, he'll see it. And, but I was always afraid, I'm like, he's never going to see how much she's grown in this series and become the person that she is. And then thank God in the second movie that happened. I was like, ah. But yeah, he's tunnel vision on how he treated her as a tool, where he forgot he was the reason why Violet was able to lead the life she has now. Yeah. We'll talk about the second movie. I'm just like, mwah, just like chef's kiss. Oh, we'll talk about deep fried. Talk about deep fried indeed. So, all right, let's get into these characters. I'm 40 minutes into this, y'all. I knew we were going to talk a long time about Violet Evergarden, but you know. So Violet herself, I have her at the top of my list. Violet as a protagonist, at first I wasn't sure what to think of her, because when we start out the series, by the way, if you've ever seen the animated movie The Secret Garden, it's like there's a cheap 90s version of The Secret Garden animated from like way back. As a kid, I like burnt my VHS tape out on that movie. I loved the animated Secret Garden. It was one of my favorite movies as a kid. I like watched it over and over again. It's cheesy 90s goodness, but and we'll talk about the age gap anime escort. We will talk about we'll talk about that. But I watched that movie so much as a kid. And yes, Wushin Benedict is best boy. He's like number 30. He's number 3. Him and Hodgins are next after Violet, by the way. But Violet as a protagonist, I got very Secret Garden vibes with her at the start of this. But at the beginning, I was wondering what they were going to do with her character, because she's such an empty shell at the start. Did you know, Star? Hello, we're starting to talk about characters. Welcome to the chat. Violet at the beginning of the series, she's such a hollow shell, and she's so empty at the start that I didn't know what we were going to do with her character. I'm like, what are we going to do? How's this going to go? And Violet, and I agree with Davis in the chat here, Violet and Dietfried have the most growth, I think, over the course of this series. And Violet, from episodes 1 through 4, it's like a slow trickle of change with Violet. It's like just a slow trickle. It's like just you're starting to see her coming back. And it's almost like a metaphor of a flower slowly growing up and blooming. Is that if you've ever grown flowers before, or you've ever grown anything, it starts out, there's a little sprout, and it like slowly comes up, and it seems like it's taking forever, right? And then once it starts blooming, then it's like a big just burst. And that's kind of how Violet was in this series. Episodes 1 through 4, she starts to develop her humanity back slowly but surely. And then in episode 5, you're like, oh, okay, she's writing letters to connect. In the Charlotte and Damien episode, you're like, okay, she's really starting to grow. And then the OVA happens. And then from episode 7 on, it's like she just blooms. And then by the last movie, it's like she's just a full-grown Violet. She's like fully bloomed. And it kind of goes back to what Gilbert says. He's like, I want you to become a character like the flower you're named after. And she becomes that. And it's like, it's wonderful. But I love that Violet, the only thing I know about the voice actress is that she also voices Mikasa in Attack on Titan. I think that's so fitting, because she has her voice actress has the perfect voice for a character, that she can be stoic and serious, almost to the point where it's hilarious. Like in the beginning episodes, she's so serious that when she's funny, you're like, she's not trying to be funny, but it's funny how she says things. But then by the end, when she's just sobbing her eyes out, you're like, no, it's the same character. It never felt out of character for Violet. I never felt like Violet's character was anything but who she was. She never felt out of character. She just felt like she was naturally progressing throughout the show. And you see that each interaction she has helps her to develop more and more as a character. She's one of my favorite, I think, female protagonists in a series, because she's very relatable, and you get the struggle that she goes through, and you just want to root for her. You want her to be happy by the end of the series, which is why the second movie makes me happy, because I'm like, okay, she finally got her wish by the end of it. And we'll talk about the second movie and all that. But I love Violet's character a lot. And I think that she's just a wonderful protagonist. her story, following it throughout. It really is. And here's the thing, it really is Violet's story. There are a lot of shonen, a lot of shoujo, and a lot of other series that maybe have not boring protagonists, but protagonists that are kind of bland and that you don't really connect to. And I think there's some series that I've watched where I end up falling more for the side characters and I end up wanting to root for them more than the main character. And this is not one of those series. This is one of those series where I really do root for Violet and you follow her throughout the story and it really is her story. It doesn't really belong to anybody else but Violet from start to finish. There's other characters that get focus, which is great, because you need more characters in the story to make it interesting. But it really is Violet's story through and through. And that's what I love the most about it, that this series, compared to others that I've watched, she gets focus and she gets to develop and grow, and nothing is really at her expense, right? I love that about her. And she's badass. She's the soldier maiden. She's like, she can completely take care of herself and needs no one else rescuing her. I mean, Dietfried saves her in that one point in episode 12, but she really doesn't need anybody else. And that's the most awesome thing about her. Like in episode 11, she just parachutes down and starts taking people out. And it's like, nah, she's good. And that one soldier's like, nah, we're good. We're not going to fight her. I'm like, good. And the fact that her voice actress plays the other characters that she does, I think is pretty fitting too. I love that. Davis, I love how all the characters grow during the series. Yeah. And then we'll talk about this. So Hodgins, Hodgins boys. I have such him. Okay, what do you say real quick before I start talking about Hodgins? You get other people's thoughts on Violet. Yeah, I think that's another thing too. Everybody gives their input on Violet's character, and that does help develop her character as a whole, like seeing other people's perspectives about her. I really like that too. Hodgins' character kind of did like a little, not a big 180 or a roller coaster, but I felt like my feelings about Hodgins throughout the series was like, at the start, you get the idea that he's just being Violet's caretaker because Gilbert told him to be. And so, but then by the end of the series, like Wushin says, Papa Hodgins, overprotective bear. Again, that's the voice actor. The voice actor for Hodgins is Dio and Adam. And he has that strong kind of parental voice. Benedict, do I love the character or do I just love the voice actor? Both, Lucas. Both. We'll talk about Benedict here in a second. Sarah, hello. We're talking about Hodgins. You've arrived just in time. So Hodgins being the overprotective father figure, I love how his character went from being a soldier to being the president to being like this father figure towards his employees to really latching on to Violet and being a father figure towards her. And then by the end of the series, he's like standing up for her. He's helping to defend her. He says he's going to like go swing at Gilbert and burst open the door. He's trying to be funny, but at the same time, that whole line, I was talking to Wushin on Patreon on Discord this morning, but that line in the second movie where he's like, Baka! And it's like, Okay, there is a spam in here. No. We're not having that. Not having that. Yeah. Putting you in timeout, user. Oh my God. Yeah, deleted. Thank you. We're going to delete that spam. That's the first time I've had spam in a chat before. Oh my God. Yeah, get out of here. We ain't got time for that. So, but yeah, then there's Hodgins' character. And I just love the idea that he kept, oh Lord, yeah, Gil's like, we ain't got time for this in this Violet Evergarden series chat. No. So I'm going to put them in timeout. This is why we need moderators. So I love that y'all pointed out from the first movie that Hodgins kept the stuffed animals that Violet did not pick. He kept the ones that she didn't pick. I was like, oh my God, that's so true. Yes. And it just shows that he had that attachment from her from the start. And then you get the idea. I love the idea that he wants a kid. I was like, he's very forward about wanting a child. And achievement unlocked, spammers. There we go. I've reached a new level, y'all. Reached a new level. We got spammers in the chat. It's a sign. But not the achievement that we want. And they're still there in the last movie. Yeah, the stuffed animals are still there, Wushin. Oh my gosh. I felt for Catalina in some of these movies because Hodgin keeps going on about wanting a child and just how much of a parent will be. And you can see her in the background the whole time, like, like, is he like, when should we do this? because we'll talk about ships. We'll talk about ships later on in the series. I'm definitely a Catalina Hodgins shipper for sure. I definitely see them together in this. But Hodgins will be such a great dad. And I love that even when he's not a protective parent, he's also like very stern. Like he's stern with Benedict. I feel like he's a father figure towards Benedict too, because he gets on to Benedict so much, like in the movie when Benedict's talking about using Violet as a way to pick up girls, which for the record, let's talk about that for a second, for a hot second. That Benedict, honey, you're using Violet to pick up girls, but the girls end up falling for Violet. So how is that helping you, sir? I'm like, these girls, if we saw anything from the first movie, these girls are all about Violet. Like, dude, I don't think they're here for you when you use Violet to pick up girls. It's kind of like when a guy tries to use a puppy to pick up girls. When you see a guy like walking around with a dog to like try to woo women, but the girls end up falling for the dog and they're like, yeah, I'm going to take the puppy. Bye. It's like, what? Yeah, no, I don't see that working. Benedict, it seemed like a good idea at the time. I feel like that's a theme with Benedict's character. It seemed like a good idea at the time. No. Like, no. Gil, I'm going to get to your comment in a minute. The scene where Hodgins looking back to see Violet and she wasn't there. Yeah, Marion, that moment in the movie, I did feel bad in that one moment when Hodgins looks back and Violet's not there. And you can tell he's a little bit sad, but it kind of was like a parent letting a child go. He was like, I got to let her go, do her own thing. And so I really like the Hodgins did that. And Hodgins has always been kind. Yeah, Davis, I agree. He just becomes better at expressing it. It's almost like he struggles too with integrating from military to civilian life, and Violet helps him grow as well. Like by the end of episode 9, when Hodgins and her have that conversation and Violet's talking about, do I deserve to exist? And I was like, oh yeah. It's like, yeah, Hodgins has been struggling with the same exact problem. Like he's been struggling to find his purpose in life after being in the war. And Violet is expressing the same emotions. I felt like after episode 9, Hodgins really got protective parental mode on Violet. Like he connected with her so much in that episode that he was like, nope, this is my daughter and I'm going to protect her because her and we got this bond. We got this connection. Like, I just love his character. He is so kind. And he finally finds a way to express it. And him confronting Dietfried, him confronting him, and like him and Benedict being protective brother-father figures to Violet. I love it. I love it. Gil, going back to we'll talk about shipping and Violet and Isabella for sure. Because that whole first movie, again, there's parts of this series that I'm like, there's no heterosexual explanation for that. And that's fine. So... But Benedict seems to be one of the most impulsive. Benedict is impulsive. But what I like about Benedict's characters, I guess we'll start talking about Benedict. What I like about Benedict's character in all of this is that Benedict, he is impulsive, but he is very, very loyal. And he's also has a very good heart. And when he becomes dedicated to something, he really commits his all to it. Because even though Benedict complains about being a mail carrier this whole series, he complains about it constantly, he still does it. And he does it very well. Like he could have been one of those characters that hates his job and just is lazy and doesn't want to do anything. But Benedict's never like that. Benedict, the whole series, even though he complains about it, he still does it, but he doesn't do it begrudgingly. He does it to the best of his ability. And he really tries to do a very good job, despite on the outside projecting that he doesn't like it. Because even to the point where he's like, well, if I had a better vehicle, I could do my job better. And that's when he gets the awesome banana mobile, right? And so he is nuclear. I agree. He is very, very hardworking. And he's very hardworking and he has a lot of work ethic. And you can tell he has ambition, right? Because he wants to take over the Postal Service after Hodgins retires. He wants to become the president. And I love in the movie, the Hodgins like, well, if you go to accounting school and become good at accounting and bookwork, then maybe I'll make you the vice president. It's like, yes. It's like, oh, I love that moment because you could see Benedict kind of light up in that moment. He's like, oh, really? Like, it's like, yes, Benedict sees like a future. He sees like, yeah, I could go to accounting school and become the vice president and then take over. Like you can see he's mapping out a future. And I love that. I love that Benedict's trajectory throughout the series is that he becomes more and more ambitious and wants to keep moving up the ladder. He's not satisfied with being stagnant. And my dog is seeing a deer outside, by the way, so he's probably going to bark. So bear with me. But yeah, and he's also a big flirt. Benedict is a big flirt. At the beginning of the series, Wushan, I'm glad you bring that up. Because at the beginning of the series, I was wondering what Benedict's role would be in all of this, because he is a flirt at the beginning. He's flirting with all of the auto memory dolls. And I was like, what is Benedict's role going to be? And I honestly thought at the beginning he was just going to be like just the flirty guy. And I didn't realize he'd have that much impact and that much to do with the series. And he ends up becoming like one of the key players, especially in both of the movies. Like he just becomes one of the lead figures in it. And I really, really love that. Hey, Kohei Yamamoto. That's all right. I am so glad that you're watching this. And hello from Japan. I don't know what time it is over there, but hello. Thank you for tuning into this. Yeah. So Benedict is our fashionista of the series. The fashion, the heels, y'all. Benedict's heels. Oh my God. I felt like, I don't know if you all have seen Jurassic World, but I felt like Benedict could give Claire a run for her money and really walk in heels, much less do it on a day-to-day basis, delivering the mail, and much less deactivating a bomb and jumping from a bridge and still maintaining myself. I'm like, Benedict, you're defying the laws of physics with your ability to be in those heels. I'm just saying, how the heck he can run and walk in those? I'm like, how? I used to do public speaking and we had to wear high heels all the time. And your ankles would just hurt like by the end of one day. I'm like, his calf muscles must be incredible, because how you could build up that much muscle running in them heels and still like with the frills on the heels, Sarah. Yes, the frills. I love towards the end of the series when he has the shirt that has the lace up back and the pants that are lace up. I'm like, dude, the lace up pants and the lace up shirt and the frills, man is ahead of his time. And then the fact that his heels didn't snap off when he kicked the bomb, an icon. Benedict was too legendary for that to happen. He willed those shoes to stay intact. I imagine that Benedict just has like 12 pairs of the same heels. He just has 12 pairs of them. It's like when you find a shirt that you really like or a pair of pants you really like, and you just buy like 6 pairs of them so that you can just wear them all the time. I have a feeling that's how Benedict is with his clothes. Because if you notice, Benedict's style doesn't change too much. And I feel like he's such a fashionista that he would change his clothes constantly after a while, but he doesn't. So I'm like, he must just have multiple pairs of the same clothing so he can wear that style all the time. Yeah. But yeah, Davis, I'm glad. And then Roland. Okay. Davis, I'm going to get to your comment here in a second, but Gil, I want to talk about Roland just a minute because I forgot. I feel so bad. I forgot to put Roland on my character sheet. I've failed. The chat's over. I failed. But no, Roland, let's talk about him real quick. Roland, not only serving as a mentor for Benedict, but also being like a deus ex machina in this series. Like there are several times when characters would be at their lowest points or there'd be a conflict, and then old Santa Claus Roland would swoop in with his magical, jovial old man charm and just save the day. I absolutely loved Roland, and I feel awful that I didn't put him on my character chart, but I loved Roland's character. I loved the connection he had with both Benedict and Violet. I felt like Roland was a connector between those two characters. Like he tied Benedict and Violet together. And I really, really loved that. I was like, he was so cheerful. And I absolutely loved him in this series. Absolutely. But Davis, you mentioned Catalea as the other fashion icon. And then, yes. So Davis, I want to bring that up. He brings up a good point in the chat about Catalea's dress becoming more and more conservative towards the final movie. I have a theory about that, but I don't know if it's true, and it's never confirmed. But I wondered if by the last movie, because Catalea, especially in the last, I feel like at movies 1 and 2, well, there is a time difference, but I feel like in the last movie, I wondered if Catalea was pregnant. I just wondered if she was, because her dress like covered more and more of her, and it seemed like it was thicker and the fabric was thicker. So there was a part of me that my head canon was that by the end of the movie that she was pregnant and with Hodgins's baby. I was like, is she pregnant with Hodgins's baby? And because Hodgins talking awful lot about becoming a dad and kids. And there's that moment where he's like, I don't want a girl, and girls are so much trouble. And you just see Catalea like in the background going, like, yeah. I just was like, and then, okay. Ooh, Davis, She has 2 kids by her in the museum photo of the staff. Oh, I need to go back. How did I not notice that? No. In the museum photo, she has 2 kids. Oh, I need to go back and see that. Oh no, Gil, the light novel says otherwise. Ah, no. I do think that the series differs a little bit from the light novel, so I need to go back. I need to read the light novel at some point. I'm going to talk about that. But my head canon was that she was pregnant at the end of the series, but I don't know. I did notice that she was wearing more and more conservative clothes, and so I was like, I don't know. The whole pregnancy thing is a head canon, but it's not checked in stone. That was just my thoughts about it. But I liked Catalia serving as the big sister to Violet. She almost seems like a cross between a mother figure and a big sister because Violet's an orphan. So Hodgins is kind of the father figure to her. Benedict is kind of the big brother figure to her. And then I felt like Catalia was very motherly to me towards Violet because she's constantly like a source of advice and she's a support to Violet. But I really liked the idea that Violet could lean on Catalia and talk to her, and Violet's like the first person to cry around and Catalia is like the first person Violet cries around. And Gandhi, I'm looking at your comment here. 2 pretty good dads, Claudia and Gilbert. Yeah, I'm going to talk about Gilbert. But Catalia and Benedict are Lucas. Catalia and Benedict are similar, but at the same time opposites. Yes, and so that was a big thing in this series too. Catalia and Benedict both have this like really energetic, outgoing personality. They're both extremely hardworking and very good at their job. Like Catalia is known as the best auto memory doll, with maybe the exception of Violet by the end of the series. And so, yeah, see you, Wushin. Thank you for joining the stream. Yep, I'll record it for later too. Okay. So I Has Magic, I'm looking at your comment too. The author for the light novels gave input and approval for the series of films. That makes me feel better too, because when an author, I feel like when a series differs from the source material, I always wonder if the people get approval from the main author, because that's really important to me. Because I feel like if you're going to differ from the source material, the author needs to sign off on it and be okay with it. And the fact that the author was okay with that change, that makes me feel a lot better. So thank you, I Has Magic, for saying that. But yeah, Catalia becomes a mom figure for Violet throughout the series. And I like that she is kind of like a link between different characters. Like she interacts a lot with Benedict, so Benedict feels really comfortable around her. She interacts a lot with Hodgins, so Hodgins is comfortable around her. Obviously, Erica and Iris, she interacts with a lot. And then Violet, so she kind of becomes like an anchor for all these characters to go to when they have problems, like a mother figure. And so I really like that with Catalia. Oh, I love that Violet's last letter in the movie was written by the author themselves. Nice. And the authors debated on writing another light novel about Violet. If they do, I'll read it. Definitely. I want to read the original light novels if they get an English translation. I like that NL that Kiowani consults the authors during the production. That's important. I think that if you've ever watched a series where the production went away from the author's voice, you can definitely tell. You can tell because it doesn't feel right? And I felt like even though I didn't know the second movie was anime only, I thought it was with the light novels because the feel of it still feels like Violet Evergarden. So it's good to know the author had input because you can tell. You can tell it's still the author's creation, even when it differs from their original source material. But yeah, I like Catalia a lot. Here's the thing, and you guys will see it in the reaction next week to the movie. But in watching the movie, when I got to the Dutch cast list, like in the movie end credits, I was like just talking, and then I looked over and saw the Dutch cast list. I swear, and I need to go back and double check it, but I swear in the casting list it says Catalia's last name is Bougainvillea, and so for a second I was like, wait, what? And so there's going to be a moment in the reaction that y'all are going to see, and y'all are going to correct me in the comments and be like, no, her last name is Boldiver. And I'll be like, oh yeah. But for a second in the cast list, they list her name. It's like a typo. They list it as Bougainvillea. And I was like, why? So I was really confused for a second watching the movie, but it's all cleared up now. It all makes sense now. So Erica and Iris, our other 2 auto memory dolls, I've got them down here. I really liked Erica and Iris. They're very different characters. I feel like we definitely get more with Iris in this series than we do Erica. Erica is kind of like a quiet introvert, and we see what we want to see, right, Nuclear. But with Erica, I did like her character, how she was set up in episodes 2 and 3, And then we see her like want to become a playwright alongside Oscar. And then by the end of the series, we see that she actually gets to go through with her dream, and she ends up she stops being a memory doll so that she can pursue her dream. And I liked that angle with Erica, because the movie makes it seem like at first that it's a bad thing to stop becoming a memory doll. Like they frame it as a lot of the memory dolls are just trying to get married and then they'll end up quitting the profession. And I like that Erica's move is considered to be a good thing. Like it's viewed in a positive light. Like, oh, she quit being a memory doll, but that's not a bad thing. She went on to do something that she really liked. So I enjoyed that angle with Erica. And then Iris ends up becoming such a player in this series, more so than I really thought about was going to happen with her. Because when we see episode 4, I'm like, okay, we've gotten Erica's backstory. Episode 4 is Iris's backstory. And I felt like we were going to be done with her character, but we weren't. She had the whole thing about wanting to become the best auto memory doll in the entire profession. And we see that slowly touched back upon as the series goes on. And then in movie 2, she actually gets to get that moment where she helps Eurus and she helps Violet connect Eurus to Lucas. And in that moment, we see her kind of elevate herself into becoming what she's been saying that she's going to be this entire series. And I absolutely loved it. I love Iris growing her hair out. I love that her like becoming more seemingly comfortable with herself, like moving on from her struggles. And I really liked how her character grew throughout this series as well. That was really, really cool. So yeah, there's also the other characters, like the side characters. I'm going to get to the Bougainvillea brothers at the end of this, if you're curious. But Luculia and Spencer, I loved episode 3. Episode 3 was the first episode in the series that made me go, oh, I'm going to cry, aren't I? Watching this, because it was like watching Luculia and Spencer. I love them showing their sibling bond, showing that type of love early on in the series, but also showing Spencer as a character that Violet can connect to in being another veteran that's come home from the war and is struggling to reintegrate into society. That was like the first sign that I was like, okay, this show is going to touch on some themes that are more than just surface level. They're definitely more connecting to like the emotionality of everything. And then Luculia, I like that she reoccurs. I thought Luculia would be more in this series than she was, but it's fine. The characters that we have throughout all impact Violet in the story in some way, shape, or form. But I kept thinking Luculia would have more of a presence in this series. But, okay, yes, Sarah, I'm going to comment about this in the movie. At first, I'm the worst, because at first I thought the old lady was Catalia because she was wearing like red. And then I was like, no, she doesn't have the same eye colors as Catalia. It can't be her. But by the end of the reaction, I thought that the old lady as a receptionist, was maybe Iris, but I'm not sure. But the old lady was a receptionist, so I'm not sure. Yeah, I debated back and forth whether it was her or not. And it could have been they were just other random characters. They weren't actual cameos. That's fine too. But Luculia and Spencer, and then Leon. I love Leon's character in this. Leon, he was a one-shot, one-episode character. I really thought he was going to be in this series more, but I absolutely loved Leon. His story is one of my favorite standalone stories in this series. The idea of him reconnecting and realizing his parents and their views of him and why they did the things that they did, and that parental love. His like crush on Violet was adorable, and how that crush developed as the series went on, as the episode went on. And then the whole idea of him like branching out and going and discovering the world, and Violet being an inspiration for his character. I loved Leon. And his voice, he's voiced by the same voice actor as Atsushi from Bungo Stray Dogs. And so I was like, of course, why wouldn't I love that character, right? And then, and I'm going to look at you guys in the chat as I talk about these side characters, but you had Oscar, the playwright. Oh my God. Episode 7, that episode and episode 10 just gutted me. But the idea of him being the lost playwright. And I felt like Oscar was like an extension of Spencer's character. Like you have Spencer being like the alcoholic at the beginning and just having his life in shambles, and Violet helps him reconnect with his. Here's the thing though. Spencer is able to reconnect with Luculia because she's still alive, and they're able to reforge that bond and move forward. Oscar is the first time in the series where we see a character who can't reforge that bond completely, right? Oscar's character can't reforge that bond. And so Oh, Kane. Yeah, you haven't finished the series. Yeah, spoilers abound. But yeah, come back to this when you're done. Absolutely. Thank you for joining the chat. And like Nuclear says, happy watching this series. Oh my God, it's so good. Um, but yeah, I felt like Oscar was an extension of Spencer's character, where Spencer was able to reconnect with his sister, but Oscar, because his daughter died, he couldn't reconnect with her. And at the time, I thought it was foreshadowing of how Violet was going to deal. Okay, Cristobal, I'm going to get to your comment here in just a second. I just looked over and saw it, but I thought that Oscar and his relationship with his daughter was going to be a representation, and it is a representation of Violet and Gilbert's relationship. But Cristobal, I'm going to pause my thoughts on Oscar here to say that old lady was a receptionist is Noreen, the girl who rejects Benedict at the beginning. Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I was so curious. It didn't hit me. I need to go back and rewatch at the beginning, the girl that rejected him. Oh, cool. Mm, yeah, man. Okay. Honestly, Ray, I don't know because back. Am I back? Oh. All right, am I back? My internet. Okay, thank God. I was like, why? I was like, don't you do this live stream? Don't you do this, Ricky Bobby? No. Okay, good. Good. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know because that was the one part about the first movie. We'll talk about that, Ray. That was the one part about the first movie that I was like, I feel like Isabel was the first one to become her friend. I feel like maybe, and it depends on how you term friend too. Like maybe like a best friend. Like maybe Isabella / Amy became her best friend, and because there is a difference in friendships, right? We all have different friend circles, but I hesitate to say that Erica, Iris, and Luculia weren't her friends because I'm like, but they kind of were, right? So maybe they weren't best friends, work buddies. I feel like though friendship's such a layered term, and friendship has so many different layers and areas, you know. I feel like, Ray, that's a good way of putting it. I feel like maybe again, Isabel / Amy kind of became level 2 friends with Violet. Like you have Erica, Iris, and Luculia that are like acquaintances, work buddies, and they are friends, but on a more a base level, like level 1 friends. And then Amy kind of like judged herself to be like level 2 friendship. Like we unlocked when you share a bath together, you become a new level of friend, right? Once you start bathing together, there's a new level of friendship unlocked that clearly Luculia, Erica, and Iris have not unlocked themselves. So when you walk down the aisle with them to a debutante ball, then I mean, when you do that, it's a new level of friendship unlocked. And we're going to talk about ships here in a little bit. So I mean, I've also found that the movie takes place between episodes 6 and 7, which I think is highly appropriate. And we'll talk about that with the movie. But yeah, so we have Oscar and then Charlotte and Damien. Talk about Charlotte and Damien. I of course have to have a soft spot for Damien because he's voiced by Kenjiro Suda, who's one of my favorite voice actors. So of course I'm like, yes, please. But Charlotte and Damien, their relationship brings up, I think, one of the biggest conflicts in the whole series, and that is what are Gilbert and Violet? And we'll talk about this during the shipping. We'll talk about this. What are they? And the movie, the series kind of establishes that age is a thing and love is a thing. And several of you during episode 5 were like, well, historically, this is how we view, like, this relationship was totally okay because historically there were lots of relationships like that. And I'm like, okay. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. It's like, okay, here's how you take it. If you are okay with Damien and Charlotte being together, then you're probably going to be okay with Violet and Gilbert being together by the end of this. If you are not okay with Charlotte and Damien being together, then you're probably not going to be okay with it. And nobody's wrong, I don't think, in this. I mean, in reality, in modern times, it's complicated. It's a different story. But in this fictional world, by the time that Violet and Gilbert do get together, she's like, what, 18 or 19 by that point. So you're like, and how love develops, how it changes. We'll talk about this in the ships. But I think the only part about Charlotte and Damien's relationship that I was really on the fence with at first was obviously when Charlotte was like 11 and there was all these suitors courting her. I was like, she's 11. No. And then even when Charlotte and Damien get engaged, I'm like, you're still very immature in how you're viewing these relationships. I'm like, I'm glad that she likes Damien and that Damien's a nice person. Like that ended in the best way possible. But I was still kind of on the fence with it. And then in the movie, you see that they're happy together and that she's older. And it's like, okay. So, I mean, I felt better knowing that they didn't have like a kid when she was 14. I was like, okay, good. They're at least waiting and letting their relationship develop. Thank goodness. So that made me feel a little bit better about them. But I like Charlotte and Damien's characters a lot. So it's such a complicated thing. Yeah. And that's the thing too, Nuclear Gandhi. That is the thing too. I'm okay with Damien and Charlotte being promised to each other with the understanding they don't have a sexual relationship for quite some time. And that's how I feel about Gilbert and Violet. I feel the same way. I am okay with them being together and having a platonic loving relationship that develops into something more over time. That's the thing. If you care about someone and you develop that relationship and nurture it, and maybe it becomes more than platonic, maybe it becomes romantic, and then after a while maybe it becomes sexual when you're both emotionally mature, fine, I'm okay with that. But then so I guess I kind of view Charlotte and Damien the same way as Gilbert and Violet in that sense, and maybe that's what episode 5 is foreshadowing. And yeah, Violet's over 18 by the time of the final movie, so, and she's developed a lot and she's matured a lot emotionally. And so, and I feel like Gilbert is the type of character that he's not going to take advantage of Violet. Obviously not. He felt awful for the way that he treated her. And so I feel like even after the second movie, their relationship has a lot of growing to do. They've got to reconnect. They've got to catch up. They have to make up for lost time and reconnect and reforge that relationship. So in my mind, ending the second movie when they're together, he says he wants her to stay with him, but that's as far as it goes. And so I feel like they have to spend all this time like reconnecting, and that relationship is going to mature and develop naturally because they do love each other, but it doesn't have to be romantic or sexual. It can be familial or parental or platonic, whatever. They just want to be with each other and they love each other and they just want to be with each other at the end. And that's what happens. So yeah, but I feel like Charlotte and Damien are a good representation to kind of show us that type of love and then kind of plant the seed. And then, Davis, thank you for sending me a link to the 2 light novels. You're a saint. You're a saint. Yay. Awesome. I may do like a 10 under 10 then. I may read the 2 light novels and the English translation and then do like a 10 under 10 about them. That would be really awesome. I would love doing that. That would be a lot of fun. So thank you. That will be, thank you so much. You're awesome. You're awesome for the first 2 volumes anyway. You're awesome. So thank you so much. That will be, I'm excited. I'm like, fall reading. Yay. All right. So getting back to our characters here. Anne and her mother. Oh my God. Episode 10, Anne and her mother. That was like the bond to end all bond. That mother being a patron saint, getting Violet to write 50 letters to her daughter to read over the course of her lifetime. Oh my God. That was just absolutely beautiful. I cried. I sobbed my eyes out in episode 10. I almost couldn't finish the discussion. When we got to episode 10, I was so like crying and sobbing. I almost thought about stopping the discussion and like composing myself. And I was like, no, I'm just going to go through it. Because then I was like, if I stop it now, will I be able to go back? And so I just had to finish it. But I really, really liked their characters. And then Amy and Taylor and Ashley in the first movie. And we'll talk about the first movie, but the sibling bond between Amy and Taylor. I was so frustrated in the first movie that Taylor didn't see Amy at the end. I kept thinking she was going to see her and it was going to be this big reunion, but she doesn't. She waits. And she's like, I want to be a mail carrier first, and then I'll go back and see her. And I'm like, I was like, dang it. I was like, I just want you to see her, but okay, fine, whatever. And then, I loved how the only character we see in the future in the series is used to show us the future in the movie. Yes. Yeah, Sarah, I like that angle too, that Anne is the only character we see the future of. And then we see Anne's granddaughter, Daisy. I love that. I love that she's our kind of catalyst, that she's a narrative device to get us through, but also makes so much sense because she's the only character we've seen the future with. I love that too, Sarah. That's a really good point. But yeah, Amy and Taylor, we'll talk about movie one there. And then with Eurus, we'll talk about him and his family. Eurus is like, cry me a river. Okay, so we got to talk about Gilbert and Dietfried. I've been like trying to hold back from talking about Gilbert and Dietfried, but we're at this point. So, okay, Gilbert and Dietfried, the Bougainvillea brothers. Oh my gosh, where do I even start? Gilbert and Dietfried are husbandos, along with Hodgins and Benedict. Are the men in this series? By the way, the men in this series are all husbando material. For the record, most of them. Yeah, Aiden, Benedict, Hodgins. Gilbert, even I feel like here's the thing with Dietfried. I feel like, you know that meme? Do you know that meme where it's the guy with his back to the wall and he's like, I hate anime. And it's like all the anime posters around his wall. I feel like with Dietfried, I'm that person and I'm like, I hate Dietfried. And I have the photos of Dietfried all over my wall. I feel like that meme. Like, I'm just like, I hate Dietfried, and my whole wall is covered with photos of him because I'm sorry, but I never hated his character. I never did. I was frustrated with him and angry with him at the beginning of the series for how he treated Violet. To be clear, I thought the way that he treated Violet at the beginning was cold and it wasn't nice. And he treated her like just a tool, like a thing. And I was like, oh, and at first I was like, are we supposed to hate Dietfried? Because I felt like we were. But his character has grown the most throughout this entire series alongside Violet. Like, he starts out in this one place and we don't quite understand his character. We just know that he's cold and he's isolated himself and he's snarky and he snaps. And in the second movie, when he tells Hodgins, he's like, I'm sorry, this is the only way I know how to talk. I was like, oh, because it all makes sense. Like, when we get the flashback with Gilbert and Dietfried and his father, and we see that he has all this resentment and anger and guilt and shame built up inside of him. Not only shame for how he's treated Violet, but shame for how he's forced Gilbert to kind of assume the role of the elder son and to go along with their father's wishes, because Dietfried was the rebel. That always struck me as a surprise too, that Dietfried was the rebellious one. That Dietfried was, because at the beginning of the series, you think Dietfried is the dutiful son that's following in the father's footsteps, and he's the one like the captain of the Navy, and Gilbert is the rebel. But it's the opposite. Gilbert was the one that went along with what the father wanted and became the military man against his other, wishes. And Dietfried, when he says, I can't help it, my love of sailing and my duty to the military are the only things I inherited from my father, like, he just can't help it. It's like just part of him. But Dietfried's character by episode 5, I was like, yeah. And then Dietfried's the eldest, so it's a twist. Oh my God. Dietfried in episode 5, I was like, okay, he's back in the series. What are we going to do with this character? And then we abandoned him for a while. And then as he slowly starts to come back into the series around episode 8 and episode 9, you're like, okay, he's coming back in, and you realize that he's suffering because his brother has died and he doesn't know what to do. And so he's projecting all of his anger and frustration onto Violet. And you're like, oh, okay, he's suffering. And I kept wanting to, and yeah, he does say at the beginning, Gil, that he was glad the father died. He did. And that always threw me off, because I was like, well, he seems like he's the dutiful son, but he was glad the dad died. And then by the end of the series, we know why he felt that way. I'll be honest with y'all. I kept expecting that Violet would write a letter for Dietfried to Gilbert. I kept wanting that to happen. I kept wanting Dietfried to sit Violet down and for them to have a conversation and for him to have her write him a letter to Gilbert. That's how I thought they were going to find out about Gilbert, honestly. In the back of my head, this whole series, I was wondering, is Gilbert really alive or is he dead? And I was going to be okay either way with it. But I thought that what was going to happen was that Dietfried was going to have Violet write him a letter to his brother. And like, I thought that was going to be when Dietfried would break down or have this emotional moment. And I thought that Violet would mail it off. And I thought somehow it would end up to Gilbert, and that's how Gilbert would reconnect with them. That was my pipe dream. It turned out to be a lot better than that. But yeah, Dietfried around I love episode 12 and 13, honestly, so much because of the relationship between Dietfried and Violet. Because like Catalia says, they really have their love of Gilbert that connects them. And they both love him so unconditionally as a brother, and as Violet loves him, that they really have each other in that moment. And that's their big connecting point. And I love that Dietfried over the course, like you said, Gil, and like you said, Cristobal, the idea that by the second movie, Gilbert is trying to become a better or Dietfried is trying to become a better person. He tries to apologize to Violet. And you can tell in the second movie, you can tell how much softer he is and how much kinder he is. Like when Violet grabs his arm and thinks that he's got something in his pocket like a weapon, and like it's going to suplex him, and he just stops and he says, Violet, in that moment, I thought that he was going to yell at her, but he doesn't. But he doesn't. He apologizes. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. It's okay. And I was like, oh, I kind of fell in love with Dietfried by the end of this series, and I didn't expect it. And I kind of, the moment where he tells Gilbert to go, oh, we got to stop them. We got to stop the scammers. Okay, put them all in timeout. But yeah, the PTSD moment, yeah, it was shocking. And that's the thing too, Gandhi, was the idea that what was scary about it was that even though 4 years have passed, Violet is not completely, because here's the thing, if you have PTSD, you're not completely over it. Like the littlest things can trigger that. And that one moment, because Violet knows how Dietfried had been in the past, that one moment triggered that to her. And she was like, oh, I got to stop him. And that's such a, oh, did the stream crash? No. Oh, no. Okay, back. Woo! Okay. I was like, I'm talking, this is what I get for talking shit about Dietfried. He's trying to ruin the stream. Oh my gosh. Okay. My internet connection is not the greatest, and it's rainy today. So of course it would be, I'm like out in the sticks. So of course it would be terrible. Right. Good deal. But yeah, I ended up just really falling for Dietfried's character. And so I love the expressions. Kiyoani does such an amazing job with expressions. And in the second movie, the moment where both Hodgins and Dietfried recognize Gilbert's handwriting, that moment, like the moment you see Hodgins' face, like the way his eyes and his facial muscles like change. And then when he shows the letter to Dietfried, they don't even have to say anything. They just look at the letter and they know. And then just in that moment, I was like, oh my God, it was so wonderful. I absolutely loved it. And so, yeah, but, and then Gil, I'm gonna look at your comment here. When they talked in the office, yeah. And then here's the thing. Yeah, Dietfried, that's the moment where he says, that's the only way I know how to talk. It was like that moment was the moment I was like, okay, this makes so much sense of how Dietfried's character is. He just masks all this insecurity by putting on this hard defensive edge on the outside. He masks all this insecurity that he has. And it all makes sense. It's like, yeah, no, that character development. Anything fried is not diet. Yes, I kept calling him Diet Hard throughout this series because Netflix kept saying Diethard, and then by the end I was like, oh no, it's Diet Fried. It's Dietfried, of course. But yeah, that conversation between him and Hodgins, and I like how protective that Hodgins and Benedict get in the second movie, where they're like just looking at him like, what are you going to do to Violet? You better leave Violet alone. I was like, I love how protective they got, and by the end, the moment where Dietfried and her are on the boat talking about his past, and he connects to her, like, it's such a great moment. And then he comes in at the end to snap old Gilbert out of his funk and be like, hey, idiot, this girl loves you. You should go talk to her, you dummy. Like, I'm letting you go. I'm going to take on the family name and you can go do whatever, like you should have done from the start because you're the younger brother. I'm going to take responsibility and take over the family name. Go do something. And Gilbert, I was always partial to Gilbert from the start because I have a thing for his voice actor. His voice actor playing, not because his voice actor plays Hisoka, which he does, if you didn't know from Hunter x Hunter, but he also plays Oikawa from Haikyuu, and Oikawa is like my favorite Haikyuu character. And so I had a thing for his voice actor from the start. But Gilbert, Kiwani loves to animate Gilbert. They love to animate them Bougainvillea boys. They make them look like the most fine, beautiful things in this series. It's like, Violet, why would you not fall for Gilbert? He's amazingly handsome. I was like, let's freaking go. Oh my God, I can't wait for y'all to see next week in my reaction to the movie, because when that moment happened, I was like, yes! I was like, oh my God. The fangirling could not be contained at that point. I was just like, let's freaking go. Dietfried getting there. I was like, the moment he was like, I want to apologize to you, but I want to stuff you in a sack right now because you're being an idiot. Like, everybody's, why is this happening? All right. I'm going to hide this user because I'm done. Done with them. Done with that. No. All right. No more of that webcam chat. We don't got time for that. But yeah, and you get where Gilbert's coming from, because Gilbert took her in, and you see all the moments with him throughout the series where he sees her being a weapon, and you see her killing people. And of course, Gilbert would feel, because he's the adult in the situation. And of course, he feels guilty, and he feels like he's used her. But then it's like, dude, she's been wanting to see you this whole time. And so you feel for him and you understand where he's coming from. But I also I'm so glad that Hodgins and Dietfried talked to him and were like, you're being an idiot. Like, we get where you're coming from, but quit being like you're not a martyr. Like, stop it. Go be with her. And I just absolutely love that. Thank you, Davis. That final movie, I love it so much. I love it so much. We'll talk about it here in a second, but I'm glad you had fun watching it. I'm so excited, y'all. 2.5 hours. If you told me, like, when the first movie was an hour and a half, I'm like, oh, that's great. Awesome. A feature-length Violet movie. But the first movie kind of felt like 2 OVAs put together. And then the final movie felt like an actual experience. It was like a full, if I had seen it on the big screen, I probably would have bawled my eyes out. Oh, I did bawl my eyes out, but it would have been like the whole time. But yeah, so we're an hour and a half into this stream. Let's when Gilbert says I love you, we've been waiting too long for this. I was like, yeah, here's the thing. They never show us in the series. They show us Gilbert. They never show us Gilbert saying they showing us Gilbert just say I love you. They don't just show him saying it in full. When he says that he's looking at Violet, we see Violet's reaction, but we never fully see him full on say it. But until the very end, until the last movie, and then we do see it. So it's like, what a tease. What a tease. I like the look of Gilbert when he's on the verge of death. Yeah, no, Ray, I'm with you. Gilbert looked really good in the second film, but Gilbert looks good with his hair down. Let's put it that way. Gilbert doesn't look good with his hair slicked back. He looks good with his hair down, just like Dietfried looks good with his braid. I kept thinking that Dietfried was going to cut his hair by the end of the second film. I thought Dietfried was going to chop off the braid. But when you think about it, for Dietfried, that braid is a representation of his freedom and his freedom from his father. It's like a jab at his dad, being like, and he said that from the first episode. He's like, I've grown my hair out because my dad would hate it. Like, you're right. He has been rebellious from the start. I should have seen that earlier. Yeah. But okay. So let's talk about ships. Let's talk about ships with these characters. Obviously, the big ship is Violet and Gilbert. Whether you view it romantic, whether you view it platonic, whether you view it as familial, whether you view it as however you do, Gilbert and Violet are like OTP status. It's like you can't, the only other person, well, I say OTP and then I'll talk about this, but Violet and Gilbert, the ending of that second movie was so satisfying for me, because Violet's had these feelings for Gilbert this whole time, and she's come to terms with them and realized what they are. And so I was so satisfied and happy that she finally got to talk to him and see him face to face. And here's the thing, I can't picture Gilbert really with anybody else. I can't, other than Violet. Like, I thought that was going to be a subplot in the second movie. I was going to be really frustrated if they tried to do some stupid subplot where they tried to, because he's on an island where all the men are gone and it's just these widows with their kids. And so I kept thinking, I was like, Kiwani, don't you do this. I kept thinking for a hot second they were going to try to find some widow on the island that was going to try to woo over Gilbert, and he was going to be with her, and that was going to be a thing. And I was like, don't make it this crappy melodrama. Don't you do this, movie. And thank God they didn't, because I kept waiting for that moment to come. But Gilbert's love's only for Violet. It's like, yeah. There's pretty hot singles in Gil's area, right? I kept thinking that was going to be a thing. And luckily they didn't do it, but I kept thinking it was going to happen. And they didn't do it. And I'm sure all the widows are like, hey, here's this really hot guy. But nope, he just got eyes for Violet. I didn't know throughout the series if Gilbert was going to live or not, if he was going to end up being alive or he was going to end up being dead. And I'd resided myself by the end of the series that he had died. And I was like, okay, well, he's actually gone and Violet's just going to move on. But even when Violet loves him unconditionally, I wanted her to be happy. And so a part of me was like, well, maybe Leon will come back around after his worldly travels and she can travel the world with Leon. Even if it's not romantic, she's with someone and isn't alone, you know? So I had that thing going on. And then, okay, yeah, Davis, we'll talk about that ship between Benedict and Erica. We'll talk about that. But here's the thing too, and y'all are going to probably hate me for saying this, and I'm going to throw it out there. And when I throw it out there, you're all going to be like, no. But for a hot second, I thought if Gilbert ended up not being alive. Yeah, during the first movie, I was like, I didn't consider him being alive because, and when you think about it, the first movie takes place chronologically between episodes 6 and 7. We don't know at that point. So I wasn't sure. And so I was like, nah, he's not alive. But y'all are going to probably judge me for this, but there's like a tiny part of my being that thought for a hot second, and Sarah, I'll talk about that moment you're talking about in the chat. There was a tiny part of me that thought that maybe Violet and Dietfried would have something. I was like, no, I'm like, I don't see it romantically at all. But there was a part of me that was like, maybe Dietfried and Violet can find like a love between them that's like almost like a sister-in-law and a brother-in-law, right? Almost like two people that have lost someone they deeply care about. And maybe they could forge like a platonic love that way. And so there was a little tiny part of me that was like, okay, if Gilbert is dead and he's not coming back, I want Violet to be happy. And I feel like Violet needs a connection to Gilbert that's healthy. And I felt like her and Dietfried could have that connection. And so there's a little tiny part of me when the second movie started that I was like, are we going this direction? I was like, during the grave scene and on the ship scene, there was actually Violet Evergarden if. Interesting, Gil. You'll have to tell me more about what this Violet Evergarden if is. But yeah, Ray, I was thinking the same thing during the graveyard scene, during the ship scene, right before the moment Sarah's talking about, which is like the 30-minute mark, which I'll talk about in a second. Right before that, when it was just her and Dietfried, there was a part of me that was like, okay, if Gilbert is actually dead, maybe this movie is trying to build up Gilbert or Dietfried and Violet's relationship. I really thought that was going to happen. I was like, are they building up Dietfried and Violet having a relationship? And I was going to be okay with it. I was like, okay, fine. If they're going to have a relationship and they're having, like Marion, like you say, comfort in each other, and they can talk about Gilbert healthily between the two of them, I was like, I'm all for it. I'm like, let's do this. And then, like Sarah said, at that 30-minute mark, we see the violets or the pansies, and he's like, Violet. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, he's alive. And it was like my whole being in that moment, the reaction was like, I lost it. I was like, nope, we're doing this. It's happening. It's all happening. He's alive. Holy shit. Let's go. Like at that point, I think I started freaking out and it was over from there. The second movie, I was just like a giddy mess the rest of the movie because I kept being like, they kept teasing it. And I was like, you bring Gilbert back. How dare you? And then I kept wanting them to find out about everything. It was just, But yeah, so I had those in mind. Violet and Leon in episode 6. I totally shipped them in episode 6. Episode 6 exclusively. I was like, they could have been a thing in another lifetime. But and then the movie 1 happened. The first movie happened, and I was like, what is this Lobelia or on High School Host Club business that we're getting Violet and Amy? Like there was, I commented in the reaction, I was like, there is no heterosexual explanation for this. Like Violet's just pan. She's just into anybody. And I was like, because yeah, I definitely got the impression that Amy/Isabella was into Violet. Absolutely. I was like, Amy loves Violet. Absolutely. That was without a doubt. I was like, okay. And Nuclear Gandhi, I'm going to talk about that in movie 2 there. I was like, okay. I was like, Violet and Amy? Okay, sure. I definitely thought at the end of the first movie that maybe Amy and that girl Ashley would have a thing, because at the end it seemed like Ashley was waiting till Violet left to make a move. And she was like, when she came to Amy at the end of the movie, she was like, oh, hey, Amy, I want to talk to you now that Violet's gone. I was like, have you been waiting this whole time to make a move from the shadows, Ashley? You mean girl? I thought she was going to be like Regina George, and she ended up not being. I was like, okay, cool. Nice. But I definitely got the impression that Amy liked Violet more than just a friend. More than just a friend. But it ended up being okay in the end, right? She ended up moving on from that relationship. And then a lot of you noted about Benedict. Benedict just had really good relationships with all the girls in the series. Like, I felt like Benedict and Iris were more friends. I felt like Benedict and Iris were more friends of the groups. They were just like besties, especially at the end when he's like taking Iris to Eurus. And then you had Catalia and Benedict. And for a hot second, I was confused because I thought that maybe Catalia and Benedict had a thing going, but then I realized that Catalia was more with Hodgins. And so then like Davis says at the end, it seemed like Benedict and Erica was maybe starting a relationship, and then the final movie didn't touch upon it. That's so weird, because isn't it odd? Isn't it odd? Erica's so quiet and shy, and Benedict is this over the top diva. And the idea that maybe Benedict and Erica had a thing, I'm like, that's such a polar opposites of, which honestly, if you think about it, Erica could probably handle Benedict's diva-ness and would be grounded and be like, okay, let's tone it down to Benedict. And Benedict would be like, but that kind of would be cool. I could actually kind of see that, but we don't really get a lot of expansion upon it. But yeah, Benedict and Catalia seem to be frenemies. Yeah, they seem to be more like, and Benedict likes to jab at both Catalia and Hodgins, I noticed. Benedict likes to poke at both of them. Catalia and Benedict, they are definitely together in my mind. I was like, if Catalia is not having Hodgins's, Catalia and Benedict have great chemistry, and Catalia and Hodgins have great chemistry. I like that Catalia gets on to Hodgins a lot. She's like, she's the point of wisdom. Whenever Hodgins makes a mistake, she's like, think about what you did. Like, I feel like Hodgins and Catalia are like a married couple. And then Benedict just likes to poke at both Catalia and Hodgins, like the annoying kid brother that he is, and just knows how to push both their buttons. It's great. I absolutely love it. But yeah, just all the ships in the series. I feel like you could do lots of different things with the ships, but just the romance in the series, it was so well, and the romance in the series never felt forced or felt cheesy throughout. And I want to talk about Nuclear, your comment right up above as we get with the movies. I don't particularly like characters coming back from the dead simply because we don't see a body, but as long as Gilbert's going to be alive, I think they handled the decision really well. That's the thing. So we'll talk about the first movie and the second movie. That's where I'm at on here with y'all. When we get to the second movie, I want to talk about that. The first movie was sweet. I know that reaction came up yesterday to it on this channel. The first movie was really, really sweet. It was very wholesome. And the fact that one of y'all said that it takes place between episodes 6 and 7, I was like, that makes sense, because episode 6 is such a wholesome, sweet ending. And episode 7 is like the start of the angst that this movie kind of fits right in between. It's got angst, but it's also very sweet and wholesome. So it felt like a nice transition into it. It felt like a nice transition as well. And so I really, really liked that. I liked Taylor and Ray. Oh my God. Talk about Lucas and Eurus. Thank you for mentioning that. And I would hope he was saying on the phone too. Y'all are saying things in the chat that I'm like, oh, I need to get to that when we get to the second movie. But I want to finish talking about the first movie first. First things first, right? So with that first movie, I like the idea that it almost felt like with Amy and Taylor's story, that it felt like 2 OVAs put together. That first movie did. It didn't feel like a full-length feature, like from start to finish, like the second movie does. It felt like 2 OVAs that were connected. And so like you have the first half, which is Amy/Isabel's story with Violet, and why she had to leave her sister, what the whole impetus for that was, her going to the debutante ball, like coming into her own, her agency, everything. And then in the second half, you had Taylor's story and how Taylor was growing up and reconnecting with Amy by the end of it. And I love that Benedict becomes a player in all this. I love that Benedict gets a major focus in the first movie. I wasn't expecting that at all. I was like, oh, we're going to focus on Benedict. But he really, it shows Benedict's growth in the first movie, that he goes from being somebody that's kind of like begrudgingly, upset at the stagnancy of where he's at with his mail carrying delivery service and he's not moving forward. And then by the end of it, you can see that he talks to the old lady and he likes his job more and he's helped Taylor and he's become a mentor to her and like a big brother figure to her. I really liked Benedict's character. It was great. And then, yeah, it did feel like two OVAs that they just put together, but I really liked it. I thought it was great. And then I felt like the angst in that movie was a nice transition. The first movie felt like it was connected with the first half of the series of Violet Evergarden. And the second movie like picks up where episode 7 starts and feels like it connects to the second half. And I really, really like that about it. I thought that was really, really cool. But yeah, Amy, I was so frustrated at the end of the first movie that Taylor and Amy didn't see each other. And then I kept trying to rationalize it. I'm like, well, if she saw Taylor, would she try to keep her in? Would she let her go back with Benedict? Did Taylor not feel like she was ready to fully see her yet? I'm like, but it's going to be several years before she becomes a mail carrier. So that's frustrating. I was like, and I almost wanted to, I kept thinking there'd be a post-credit scene and I kept wanting to see like what we did with Anne and Daisy. I wanted to see the future and I wanted to see Taylor and Amy meet up again and Taylor to be older and for them to reconnect. I kept wanting to see it, but I was like, we didn't get that. And so I guess we get to ambiguously think about it, right? And then, like you said, Gandhi, the postmen have great lines. Every letter deserves to be delivered. A postman is someone who will deliver anything, anywhere, and we deliver happiness. Yeah, it's so inspiring, right? And I said this in the reaction. My grandfather was a man that worked for the Postal Service. He delivered letters, and he did that job after World War II. That's why this story resonates so much with me, with Violet, I think, because Violet, I connect her a lot with my grandfather. My grandfather came back from the war and had to integrate into society again. And he became a postman. He basically did Benedict's job. He delivered mail for like 50 years after the war was over. He did it until he retired. And it was his passion. And now watching this series, it makes me kind of emotional because I'm like, the idea that he was delivering happiness and he got to see people and connect with people that way. I'm like, I can just see it. And so I felt like it resonated. I think the series resonated a lot with me for that personal reason, which I really, really love. But okay, so the second movie. Oh my God, y'all haven't seen the reaction to it yet, unless you've been on Patreon. It came out yesterday on Patreon. And it's going to be out next Wednesday on here. But I wanted to do this live stream beforehand. But the second movie. Can we talk about it? Can we talk about it now? If you've not seen the second movie, spoilers to the second film. The second film. Let's talk about it. The Violet Evergarden movie that just came out. I'm so glad it came out right around this time on Netflix because I was afraid that I would get to the end of the series and it wouldn't be out. I wouldn't be able to talk about it for several months. And then it came out just at the right time. And I was like, yes. But let's get into this movie. Oh my God. So yeah, Dietfried's character, we've talked about him and Hodgins, the growth of Hodgins and Dietfried's characters. Benedict gets focused in the first film, and I love that about him. But Hodgins and Dietfried, like their focus in this film of Hodgins slowly, it was a tour de force indeed. Like Hodgins slowly letting go of Violet, letting her go, letting her like transition away from the Postal Service and live her life. You cried during episode 10. Let's bring that back, but harder. I'm going to note this in the reaction so you guys will see it. But it's like, oh, did you cry in episode 7 when a parent lost a child? Yeah. Did you cry during episode 10 when when a mother had Violet write letters to her daughter to be read post-mortem? Did you cry during both of those episodes? Okay, what if we merged them together into a pain bomb and just threw it in your lap? It's like, Eurus, and you knew from the start, here's the problem. You knew from the moment that you met Eurus, the moment that Eurus and Violet met and you saw him in that hospital bed, you knew what was going to happen. You just knew. You're like, he's going to die. You know he's going to die, and that's going to be it. And he's going to have Violet write the letters. You just know it's going to happen. But then you don't know when it's going to happen. And at the near climax of the movie, when the second act is getting over and Violet's at her lowest point and it's raining in that lighthouse and you think things just can't get any worse, that's when they get the Morse code telegram that, oh, by the way, Eurus is dying. And she didn't get a chance to write the letter to Lucas for him. And I agree with y'all, Ray, up there in the chat. As far as shipping goes, I fully expected Eurus to tell Lucas that he loved him. I thought that that Eurus loved Lucas and that was going to happen over the phone. And here's the thing, we don't see the end of the phone conversation, right? Iris walks out of the room and into the hallway, and then we see the end of the conversation, and we assume the conversation's ended, and he dies right after that. And that's when the mother screams. So for all we know, maybe he did tell Lucas that he loves him. Maybe he did. We don't get full explanation. We don't get the full confirmation of what happens. Maybe that's happened. Maybe that was the case. That's my headcanon anyway. But I was a sobbing mess and I was trying to hold it together. And then when the parents started reading the letters, I was like, nope, it's not holding together. And the part that broke me, the part that I was like, Sho, you are so cruel, is when the little brother reads the letter, when they read the letter to the little brother. And at the end, he jumps from the father's lap and he walks over to the bed. And I was like, Sho, don't you do this. Don't you do this. I was like, don't you do this, Sho. And he walks over to the brother's bed and he's like, oh, thank you, brother. And I at that point, I just lost it. I was like, him saying thank you to his dead brother. I was like, it was over. It was over at that point. I was like, thanks, Sho. Thanks for making me feel like my heart's been ripped out and just thrown to the ground. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so Eurus's whole storyline was just like a combination of episodes 7 and 10. And Violet, I love when Violet offers the emergency rations when she's like, I'll write the letter for you. And this spare change will be enough because it's our emergency procedure. I was like, Violet, that's so sweet and so cute. And then Iris gets the chance to have him connect with Lucas. But oh my God, just so sad. Like I bawled my eyes out at that point. And then, yeah, it's Ruffsville, right? It's Ruffsville. And then, yeah, but Dietfried and Hodgins' character, I feel like Dietfried grows. I could tell you're trying to hold. Yeah, no, I was trying to. I told myself at the beginning of the reaction, I'm like, I'm not going to cry. I'm going to make it one. I'm not going to cry. And then, nope, didn't get there. Didn't make it. Yep, couldn't make it. But Dietfried's character, I was so proud of how much Dietfried grew throughout that second movie, where he was just like, he not only was kinder to Violet, but that he communicated with Hodgins, and then he got to Gilbert right there at the end. It was like Hodgins' Baka line. Oh, Hodgins is screaming at Gilbert. I was like, thank you. Hodgins was saying what we all were thinking. We were like, Gilbert, you idiot. She's come all this way to see you. I was like, oh, no. Hey, Arima Mary, we're talking about the second movie. The reaction's coming out next week, but we're going to talk about it now. Here's the thing. And I've heard that it's different from the light novel, and that's fine. I am eventually going to read the light novels, and so I'm going to be curious to see how it differs. Don't spoil me. I'm going to read it and find out. But there's been talk. I know Space Monkey on Patreon talked about it, and I'm not commented back on everybody's comments with the movie yet. I haven't got to those comments yet, but I've been reading them. And so here's the thing. There's part of me that I had resigned myself at the end of episode 13 that Gilbert was dead. And I'd resigned myself to that fact. But episode 13 just didn't feel final. It didn't feel like the end, right? And I think it's because I knew there was going to be movies afterwards. I felt like the episode 13 wasn't the end. And I think it's only because I knew that there was a movie afterwards. And that skewed my perception. If I hadn't known about the movies and the series had just ended, I would have been okay with it. But it still leaves you feeling like and even the letter that she writes at the end of episode 13, I'm like, it's fine, it's good, but I felt like something was missing, right? And then you watch the second movie, and that letter that she writes Gilbert in the second movie, it comes down the little grape trolley. When it was coming down the grape trolley, I almost lost it a second time. I was like, nope, that letter's coming down, and you see Dietfried's eyes get wider when he recognizes the letter, and he's like, and you know that Dietfried's holding it together, and then Gilbert has the letter with his one arm, and he's just like reading it. That letter was what I was waiting for. That was the letter I was waiting for Violet to write Gilbert, that expressed all of her emotions, that she loved him, that she thanked him, that he was the guiding light in her life. That was what I was waiting for. and that she still cared about him even after everything that happened, even after all his guilt, everything, she still cared about him. That's what I was waiting for. And I was like, oh. And that Eurus, yes, nuclear, that he's so happy to see that she gets to reunite with Gil. And then in that moment he gets to reunite with Lucas, and the parallels, it's so good. Like, that letter was so perfect. And that moment that you connect Eurus and Violet together, it's so wonderful. And so here's my thing. Yes, is it cliche and kind of cheesy that Gilbert survives? Yes, and they explain it in a way that makes sense. And you can be like, how could anybody survive that? Whatever. How did Violet not die from blood loss from both of her arms being gone? You tell me. So I mean, like, if she can survive both of her arms being ripped off and doesn't bleed to death, then yes, I will accept that Gilbert survived that explosion. Sure. Okay. The anime logic, whatever. We'll do what we can. But there's a part of me that I understand if people are frustrated that Gilbert lives, because on the one hand, it's very unconventional to have a story end where Violet has to move on without him. But when you see just how tied she is to him, there's a part of me and the romantic in me that wants to be satisfied. I'm watching these movies as escapism. They have a lot of realism in them. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I want Violet to have a happy ending. And that moment where he looks up in the sun setting and Dietfried's just like screaming her name and his hair's like all everywhere, and like any pretense of formality is over. And he like trips and falls and everything. And Wushin had noted in the Discord this morning from Patreon, she was like, how did Violet hear him over the sound of that boat? I was like, shh, anime logic. If Pixis can shout from a wall 200 meters in the air in Attack on Titan, then I will accept that Gilbert can shout her name from a cliff and that she hears him. I'm so fine with it. My heart was so happy because I wanted them to see each other one more time. And they do. It's like, it just works. Leave it alone. It's the ultimate romance. It's the romantic ending that we all want. It's him running to the airport to stop her from flying away. I'm okay. Yes, that letter, the reunion, it was what I imagined. It was chef's kiss. I can't just, I love it so much. Okay. Davis, the movie, like the series, pays such great attention to the fine details. It looks like Erica's reading a letter from Violet and crying. Yeah, the details from that. And the idea that Violet wrote them letters. I imagine that she did. And I love that so much. But yeah, and then them both meeting up in the ocean together. Like, it was Violet like a siren. Dietfried pulled her out of the ocean, and then she goes back in the ocean to get to Gilbert. It's just like, it's poetry. I love it. Pablo, hello. Welcome to the chat. Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind words. And then Ray, we're going to talk about that. That post-credit scene. But yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, the ocean scene, Kyoani showing off again. They were like, oh, by the way, look at us showing her wading through the water. But the thing that gets me is that y'all commented that they really didn't have a script for that moment. They just let the voice actress do whatever she wanted to and what she felt was natural. And it makes sense. Like, it's sort of like when you see a celebrity after you've waited to see them in person. I'm not really starstruck. I don't really get starstruck around celebrities. My best friend does. And my best friend got to meet like one of their favorite celebrities years ago. And when they met them, they didn't know what to say. And they were just sitting there like, like frozen. They didn't know what to say. And I feel like Violet's the same way. Like, she's spent all this time waiting to see him again, and he's finally in front of her, and just all the emotions bubble up and overwhelm her, and she doesn't know what to do. And she's like, I don't know what to do anymore. So she just cries and says Major. And one of you said that she like whispers Ashiteru in the moment. And it's like, and yeah, that's the thing, Davis, when she starts hitting her leg in frustration, she's like trying to get herself to say something and get the sensation in her leg, and she can't. It's like, it's such a real human thing to do. I love that little detail. It was so perfect. It was so perfect. And yeah, Kyoani, just the animation of the sunset, the way that it illuminates all the colors on Gilbert, and Gilbert has like the blue hair with the green eyes. It's just, it's so good. And then he gets to hug her, and he's like, I've waited so long to do this. And it's just like the romantic in me was just absolutely gushing. I was just like so overwhelmed, just like Violet. Like, just what do you say in that moment? And for a second, I was really sad that he lost the letter. He let the letter go. And for a split second, I was like, no, keep that, save that. But the point is he doesn't have to because he has the real thing. It's like, oh, he has the real thing in front of him. So he doesn't have to save it anymore. It's really, really cute. I liked that a lot. The more I thought about it, the happier I was because it was a nice framing device to tie back to the start of the series. When she loses the letter out the hospital window, it's a nice callback to that. And it all like hits full circle. I've waited so long to do this. Oh my God, Gilbert. Yeah, like I was like, I was like, I waited for this moment between you two. Absolutely. It's just, I was like chef's kiss on the ending. And I kept thinking, and the violet, and they waited till the end of the movie to show you that the stamp on the image on the stamp was violet. Absolutely, Davis. I love that part too. And the whole time I knew there was going to be a post-credit scene. I was waiting for it. I was like, come on, show. You've got a post-credit scene. What are you going to do? Are you really going to end it on just the two of them in the ocean together? I was like, And then we get the moment with Daisy. And so I was going to talk about this. Ray, you pointed out the thumb gesture. Yeah. And so I won, Sarah, I'm going to talk about you and Ray's comments in the chat. One, I thought that Gilbert, when he let go of the letter, that he was going to like reach up and wipe away her tears with his hand because he only has the one hand. That's my headcanon of what happened. I'll stick with it. That's my headcanon. But also the man in the post office, I commented on the reaction with this, but I almost felt like when he does the gesture, I felt it was either one of two things. Either Violet made that gesture known around the island and that she started doing this all the time in honor of Eurus. And I think that's actually what the case is. I think that she started doing this gesture, like the cool gesture, and it just caught on and everybody was okay with it and they just all picked it up. I thought that was either scenario one, which in my head thinking back, I think that's the case. My other scenario was the guy in the post office was like Violet's grandson and that he like learned the gesture from her. That was like my other headcanon, was that maybe the guy in the post office was her grandson, kind of like that Daisy is the granddaughter of Anne. I thought maybe that was the case, or the son of Violet and Gilbert. I don't know. Probably not. It's probably the first scenario, but that was just like a little possibility, like theory crafting in my head that was going on while I was watching it. But I kept waiting during those credits. I was like, I'm not stopping this movie till I get to the very end because there's going to be something, even if it's 10 seconds. And oh my God, Ray, that moment at the end where we get the pinky promise and then them sitting on the bed together, looking at each other. And I noted in the reaction, they're at eye level, they're equals. In that moment, he's no longer her superior officer. He's no longer the major. He's just Gilbert. And she's no longer the soldier maiden. She's just Violet. And they're on equal footing, look at each other straight in the eyes. It's just, and she brought the dog with her and the stuffed animal on the bed. It's just, it's so good. I love the second movie so much. It's just so wonderful. It was the end of the series. That was like, if you're going to end it somewhere, and it leaves it just ambiguous enough where we're hungry for more. We want more content with Violet and Gilbert, but it's enough. It's enough to satisfy you. But yeah, so Davis, you said, my brother and I talked about if Keanu did more Violet. Yeah, and it would lose the magical charm. Yeah, I feel like as much as we get greedy, right? We get greedy when a show is good. When a show is good, we, the audience members, it's natural that we want to be greedy and we want more of it. We're like, okay, we need more Violet. But honestly, I kind of don't want any more because I feel like it ends on such a great note that it's satisfying and it's ambiguous enough that we, the audience, we can make up our own headcanons and we can keep the story going on beyond that, but it doesn't lose it doesn't get lackluster. Daniel, I always wondered why they didn't include Violet's characteristic blue jacket in that final scene, but they did include her suitcase, parasol, and bear. That's a good question. I feel like the bear, the little bear, the dog toy she had gotten from Deep Freed, and that showed her connection to him. The pair and Hodgins too, because Hodgins, the parasol, I felt like the bear was more Hodgins, than Deep Freed. But then you had the parasol was from Oscar that showed the connection. And then the suitcase was like the auto memory dolls with the suitcase with the typewriter in it. So I felt like those three things she kept behind were like her connections to her former. It was the connections to when she thought Gilbert was lost and had to move on. It was the connection to when Hodgins took her in and gave her a new life. And it was connections to what that new life had been with the auto memory dolls. And so I felt like those were the things, but I felt like her shedding the jacket was maybe shedding that profession from her. Now she's going to move forward with Gilbert and start a new life. So she's keeping her past with her as a reminder of how far she's come, but maybe this is starting something new. And I also like that it was kind of like her and Gilbert are bare in that moment. They're just like stripped down to their bare essentials, like just looking at each other equally, and they're on equal footing with one another. I don't know. Maybe they can genuinely express their emotions between one another. Oh, okay. Wait, there's more artwork of her life on the island afterwards, and she's depicted without the jacket. Maybe that's why. I need to look up this official art of her life afterwards, after the movie. I feel like now the good thing is I've seen all the Violet Evergarden content. I can read the light novels, and I can now, oh, Sarah, have fun in class. Thank you for joining the chat. Thank you. I feel like now I can be spoiled. I can now look at all the fan art. I can look at everything, and I won't feel spoiled. I can look at it all and know the full context. That's exciting. Whenever I finish a series, it's bittersweet because on the one hand, you don't want the series to end, but on the other hand, you're like, now I can go look at everything and I won't be spoiled and I can enjoy it in full and rewatch the series. And like I said, I've rewatched the movie like 4 times already, so it's been fun. The calendar art. Ooh, that depicts the festival. Yes, I need to go look this up. Yeah, please, Daniel, if you want to link some on Patreon in the comments for the movie, please do so. I would love to see that, or message me them or something, or put them in Discord, whatever. That would be awesome. There's a year's worth of work they don't show due to a time skip in the end of the series. Oh, cool. Okay. I would like it if they put that maybe into like an extra feature scene thing, Davis. That'd be pretty cool. I need to see the calendar, Gil. I need to see the calendar at this point to see them all together. That would be really, really good because I want to see official art now of them all together. I want to see it. So yeah, I just felt like the ending was perfect. It was a great round out to the series. If you were going to keep Gilbert alive, that was the best way they could have done it. And it was angsty, it was sad, but it was hopeful and beautiful at the end. It was just everything I could have wanted. I was really happy with it. So, like I said, I'm eventually going to read the light novels and get into those. And I know, Davis, thank you for saying you're sending me some links to them. The last thing I want to do before we talk about the series that's going to come after Violet Evergarden, I do want to talk about ranking. I did a ranking of the episodes along with the movie and the OVA. And so I've done this for another series that I've done, and I had a lot of fun with it. So I wanted to rank the movies and episodes. There's 16 total pieces of media here. We have the OVA, the 2 movies, and then the 13 episodes. So I want to kind of rank those. But yeah, I definitely want to get that calendar art and look at that now that the series is over. So please keep in mind my rankings. Hey, Aunt King with sexy eyes. Hello. We're nearing the twilight of this stream, but I'm going to have it recorded, and so it'll be up on here. But I want to rank the episodes along with the movies and the OVA, and then I want to talk about the series that's coming after this. So that's where we'll be. So probably end here at the 2 hour and 30 minute mark. Who knows? I say that, but you all know I run long. I tend to talk more and run longer than I expect. But so I've ranked these from 16 to 1, and I want to be honest. These are all subjective, and they're just with how I feel right now. So, and I'm probably going to change my mind like tomorrow. I'll say that these are my favorite, and this is the order, and then I'll change my mind within 5 minutes. So again, totally subjective. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yay. I appreciate that, Davis. Thank you for sending me the novel links. I'm so excited to read them. Yay, raw. Okay, so if I'm doing number 16 to number 1, so I would say that of all the different OVA movies and episodes in the series, my least favorite is probably the OVA. Just the OVA between episodes 5 and 6, or 4 and 5. And I know and I like the OVA a lot. I like it. Thanks, Aunt. I like the OVA a lot, but it was short, and I felt like the other episodes in the movies are just better. So again, this is totally subjective. There wasn't an episode or part of Violet Evergarden that I didn't like, so that's great. These are all just like what I liked the most, I guess, from my least favorite to the most favorite. So the OVA would be number 16. And then the early on part of the series is probably my lesser favorite episodes, because I feel like once episode 6 hits, it's like the series really starts to cut deep and really get into the big themes and overarching message of the show. So number 15 would be episode 1. I love episode 1 is a great start to the series, but it's not my favorite. And I feel like episode 13 bookmarks it around better. So I like episode 1. It's a great start. And that last line where Gilbert says, I love you, really hooks you from the start. You're like, oh, what's this show going to be about? It was great, but it's my number 15. Episode 14, Never Coming Back, is episode 2 is number 14 for me. The ending of episode 2 really elevated it, where Catalia and Hodgins have the conversation in the bar, and he talks about Gilbert not coming back. That's when you know things are going to be serious in the show, because in episode 1, you get the idea that there's this man that Violet loves that could be alive. And then episode 2, Hodgins frames it like he's dead. And you're like, oh, what is this? And it just kind of increases that mystery. Number 13 for me is You Won't Be a Tool, episode 4. I liked Iris's backstory, but it was just a standalone episode. And I feel like there's other episodes that connect better to Violet. Number 12 is episode 3. I liked Luculia and Spencer's You May Be an Exemplary Memory Doll. I like Luculia and Spencer's intro. I like Violet going to the auto memory doll school. But again, it's more of like an introductory episode, and it's just building things up. And I feel like once we hit the ground running with the second part of the season, that's when we really explore Violet's character a lot more. So it would be my number 12. Number 11 is episode 5. You Write Letters That Bring People Together. I like the Charlotte and Damien story. It was probably, and it introduced Dietfried back into the story. It set up like the whole conflict that was about to happen in the second half. I really liked it. But then we get down to our top 10. So top 10 episodes or media with Violet. Number 10, I think, is the first movie. I like the first movie a lot. It's wholesome. It's sweet. I love Amy and Taylor's story. It was a nice breath of fresh air after you dealt with all that angst from the series, but it was just really wholesome and sweet. I liked it a lot, but I just like the other ones better. And then here's the thing. Number 8 and 9 for me are interchangeable. Number 8 and 9, a lot of people say that they don't like episodes 12 and 13 as much. I like episode 12 and 13 a lot, because I've cried my eyes out at this point through the second half of the series. I needed us to get back to the plot and to get back to Violet and Dietfried's relationship mending itself and getting back to the whole rounding out with her letter to Gilbert. So I felt like I put episode 13, the series finale, as number 9, just because it left me hungry for more. I felt like it could have been a series finale, but I wanted more. And so that's why I had it as number 9. And then number 8, I had episode 12, mainly because of Dietfried's character development and him slowly realizing with Violet that she's not a tool, she's not a weapon, she can think for herself and she can be her own person. So that's where I had that episode. Episode number 7, I had episode 8, No Words. It's just not a titled episode. It's where we get into her and Gilbert's backstory. It's one of my favorite flashbacks that I think I've watched in an anime, because it's so telling and explains so much about their characters. And then number 6 is episode 9, which is Violet Evergarden, and seeing him get shot. Like, that was just nerve-wracking, seeing him get shot, Violet having to do the 5 stages of grief in 2 episodes. And then episode 9, her going to like Hodgins and saying like, why do we exist? What's the point? And then Hodgins telling her like all the good things that she's done. It was great. So then we get into the top 5, my top 5 favorites. And these, I feel like you can interchange these top 5 however you want to. But if I've rewatched an episode or something with Violet Evergarden, these top 5 I've rewatched the most. Number 5 is episode 6, Somewhere Under a Starry Sky. Some people don't like this episode. I loved it. It's my favorite standalone in the series. I love Leon's character. I love the story between him and Violet. I love that for me, it's one of the first time Violet really articulates and reveals that she does know what love is. Yeah, number 6 is definitely in the top 5. So I feel like it's the one moment where Violet first articulates that she understands what love is. And Leon recognizes it, and he's like, you do understand love. You don't realize that you understand it. And I love Leon's character. It's amazing that in 23 minutes, we develop Leon's character so much, and we show his entire character arc in one episode. And he starts out in one place, and over the course of an episode, because of Violet, completely changes. And it felt in character. It felt natural. And then at the end of the episode, he like goes out and decides he wants to discover the world. It's like, oh, and he has a crush on Violet. It's really sweet. Their relationship's nice. I love episode 6. It's great. I really struggled with where to put this next episode, if I should put it in the bread scene. Yeah, where he's like, tears the bread and everything. It's like, it's so good. Episode 6 just makes me smile. It's a great episode. It's so good. And then we get into pain. And then from the happy episode 6 where things are great, we get to episodes on pain. So the top 4, and then comes the pain. Number 4, I almost made this number 3, but I backed up a little bit. Number 4 is episode 11. I don't want anybody else to die. Episode 11 is so heartbreaking because it's Aiden's story. I compared it to Grave of the Fireflies. It's such a sad episode. It's so quiet. And it's the moment where Violet breaks down in public. We see Violet like holding his arm, holding his hand, even though he can't feel it. And we see her like pretending to write the letter, like memorizing the words. And it's just episode 11. It gets me. The quietness of it is what gets me. The moments where the fire is slowly dying. And what guts me about it is that, you know that she's a soldier and that she's probably seen other soldiers die and she knows the process. And what really hit me the hardest was that Violet knows the process that he's dying. She knows that he's losing sensation. He can't see anymore. And she holds his hand and does what she can for him and starts to tell him what's happening so that he can process it. But she knows he's dying. And in that moment, I was like, oh my God, like she understands completely. And the idea that he had to write the letters, and it's such a sad, somber episode. And it's literally like nuclear. I agree with you. It's one of the most intimate moments in the series. And it absolutely just tore my gut out. I was like, I put it as number 4 because it's just hard to watch. It's hard to watch. And I feel like even episodes 7 and 10, even though they made me cry more, there's a hopeful vibe to them, right? There's some hope there that Oscar and Anne get at the end of those series. At the end of episode 11, it's really, his parents get the letter from Aiden and there's hope there. But like the love of his life no longer has him in her life. He's dead. She won't ever get him back. And in that moment, Violet realizes just how heartbroken Marie, that girl, is. And she's like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want anybody else to die and go through the same thing that I'm going through and the same thing that she's going through and his parents are going through. And so it's like, it's such a heartbreaking episode, but it's so intimate and beautiful. And the way that they did the sound design in that episode is just, it's gorgeous. So then number 3 is episode 7, the Oscar episode. It doesn't have a title either. That was the first episode that broke me. I was like, and the faucet's on. I had not cried like that for anything. I thought that was the most I was going to cry in this series. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. Fun times, right? But that episode really was so personal because it was just like, how many last moments did I take away? That was the thing. That was the thing that got me. It wasn't only Oscar's struggle with moving on from losing his daughter. It wasn't just that got me. And the scene where she walks on the water for a split second, that image where she walks on the water and it pans around and we see the autumn leaves and everything. It's one of the most iconic moments in the series for me because it's in that moment, Violet's living out his daughter's wish and he has that breakdown moment. And then Violet doesn't understand that he's having the breakdown moment. And she's like, I did it, see? And he's like, and we're all like, it's just, the miracle, the iconic moment. I agree. Yeah. The miracle that happens. It's so good. But then at the end, Violet realizes that she was able to create that final happy moment for Oscar. But then she realizes there's so many families that will never experience that. And I think that leads right into episode 8. It leads right into the whole flashback with her and Gilbert and dealing with Gilbert's death. It's like, okay, you've just helped a parent deal with the loss of their child. Now we're going to flip it and you're going to deal with the loss of this parental figure to you. It's like, Speaking of parental figures, that means number 2 is episode 10. A loved one will always watch over you. I sobbed. I could barely make it through it. It was hard. It was ultimate pain. And the thing of it is, it's kind of like in the second movie, you know what's happening. You know from the start that the mom is dying and the mom is losing it. And she just wanting to, and you get the impression that she's having Violet write a letter to Anne. And I thought that she was having Violet just write a letter to Anne, write a letter to the family members, do all of that. I was like, okay, that's what we're doing. And then when you find out that she had Violet write 50 letters, that she sacrificed a week of her life to give Anne 50 years of moments with her, it was over. I'm like, it's like the perfect marriage of pain, and it's the perfect marriage of pain and just wonderment that this show gave us this moment of this girl Anne getting to be with her mother once a day for 50 years. I mean, what? Yeah, Davis, if you don't tear up at episode 10, you have no feelings. I'd say if you don't have any emotional response to episode 10, are you human? And yeah, and then that's when Violet breaks down at the end, saying that I had to hold back. The moment where Violet recognizes and tells the others that she had to hold back tears around the mom because she didn't want the mom to feel any worse. It's like, what? How? And just the idea of Violet reconnecting with Anne when Anne hugs her, when Anne has Violet read the story to her, and Violet sees the parallels between her and Gilbert and her reading the story. All of that, it's such a beautiful episode. And it doesn't even, that's the thing about these top 4 episodes, they don't even try. Like Keone just flexes at this point. They're not even trying to wow you with the animation and the soundtrack. It's so natural that it doesn't feel forced or put on. It just feels like they're just telling a story. And oh, by the way, this story is animated in the most beautiful fashion possible with the most gorgeous music. And we're not even trying. It's like, and so, yeah, then obviously number 1, controversial. The second, the movie, it's my favorite. I'm like, they saved the best for last. And I know that it may be cliche and it may be schmaltzy and but it's such a perfect marriage to me. That final movie is, it has the hopefulness of the series. It has the hopefulness. It has the romance. It bookends and ties everything together. We get character development with Hodgins and Dietfried. We get character development with Benedict and Iris. We get Eurus to be the emotional thread throughout that ties us to the angst, to the pain. We get that horrible pain with Gilbert rejecting Violet, and then everybody telling Gilbert that he's stupid. And then Gilbert going back to Violet and their confrontation at the end. It's like the whole series was building up to this final movie and we didn't even realize it. And then the final movie happens and it was 2.5 hours of me just sitting there, like, just in awe. I felt like the whole series was leading up to that final movie, and the final movie was like the reward. It was like, you've suffered through all these episodes. You've cried your eyes out. You've cried your eyes out and you've suffered. So now we're going to celebrate and have a movie where you're still going to cry, but by the end, you're going to feel happy and you're going to feel like, I felt satisfied and full at the end. I was like, okay, this was the end of the series and I'm totally fine with it. But yeah, yeah. And I honestly, if y'all rank them differently, I totally get it. And if you like the first half of the series better than the second half, I get it, because it does feel like a transition throughout. And I feel like you're either going to really like the first half or you're really going to like the second half. But I feel like as a series as a whole, I honestly did not expect going into this series that I would love it as much as I did. I didn't know what to expect. And I didn't feel like I'd fall in love with it like I have. And now it's like, this series is so wonderful and I get why people love it. I'm like, I get it. Everybody's like, oh, Violet Evergarden, it's great. I'm like, no, it really is. And it's one of those things where I feel like Keone does not get enough recognition for just what a masterful job animating and directing the series they've done. But it's so good. It's so good. So yeah, to round out this chat, I've talked nearly 2.5 hours. Oh my gosh, not enough, but I don't want to keep y'all all day. It's one of the few animes that it's a masterpiece. Yeah, it's so good. And if it's your number 1 anime, I get it. I do. It's so gorgeous. So I am going to eventually read the light novels. I'll probably do like a 10 under 10 about the light novels to talk about like them once I get through them or do something. But before we go, I want to answer questions in the chat that y'all have. It's got a perfect ending, oddly enough. Yeah, no, it's a perfect happy ending. I agree, Cristobal. I agree absolutely. So after next week is going to be the movie 2 reaction on YouTube, and on Patreon we're going to start the new series next week. Worked on it. Oh no, Davis. Oh. Some of the people that worked on the movie died in Keone's studio during that fire that happened several years ago. That's so sad. I feel like this movie is a tribute to them, though, because it's just a testament to their craft and how well they did on it. It's gorgeous. So I'm going to answer some questions in the chat here before we go, or if you all have anything else to say about the series. But starting next week on YouTube, there'll be the movie 2 reaction on YouTube. But on Patreon starting next week, I had a poll. It was a Patreon only poll, and I wanted to do a new series, like a series that came out this year that has not been reviewed maybe a lot or reacted to a lot. And I wanted to watch a series that came out this year. And so the series that won is actually a donghua. It's actually a Chinese animation, which I'm pretty excited about. So next, in 2 weeks, next week will be the movie 2 reaction. But a week after that, I'm going to be reacting to Link Click. So Link Click is a Chinese donghua. It is like a supernatural mystery thriller series from what I've been told. I'm pretty excited about it. I don't know much about it at all, except that it's really popular and that a lot of people really liked it over the summer. It seems totally different from Violet, which that's okay. We'll do something I don't want anything replacing Violet. So we'll definitely be doing that. So Link Click is going to be the series that replaces it. NL, your comment, any new Kiwani shows in the future? Yeah. So, okay. I do eventually, I'm going to have, I know Sarune. Sarune is a sports, it's an archery show that Kiwani does. Sarune is going to be on a future poll. Whenever I get done with Ace of the Diamonds, Sarune is going to be on that poll. Sarune will be. I'm going to research what some other Kiwani shows are to maybe put on future polls as well. Whenever these dang free movies come out with the English subtitles, let me tell you, in December, I'm going to be doing some videos about free in December. So I've got planned some movies to do for December with free that I'm pretty excited about. But whenever the free Final Stroke movie comes out, you better darn believe I'm going to be watching it. And we're going to look at that Kiwani water animation. Kiwani is great at 2 things: animating water and hot anime guys. Like there's so many husbandos in this series. You had Hodgins, Dietfried, Benedict, Gilbert. You had all your hot anime men, and then in free, it's just like a buffet of anime men that they love to animate. So I'm like, all right, let's do this. I still think you would love Moribito. Ooh, Moribito. I'll have to put that on my list, Davis. Absolutely. Do you have any reactions to anime or shows that aren't sad? Okay. Pick. Watch free. If you want a comfort anime that is going to make you feel good, watch Free. It's by Kiwani. I've got reactions on my channel to Free. It sounds like a sports anime, but it's really more of like a character discussion. It's more like a character dive, if you will, into those characters. So if you want to watch Free, it is my comfort anime. If I want to feel happy, I'll go watch Free because it makes me feel happy every single time. So it is not sad at all. It is the most feel-good, happy anime you will watch in a while. And if you like Kiwani's animation, you will love it. So Free is a great choice. I highly recommend that series. Definitely. It's probably the happier shows that I've watched on this series. Let me see. Dragon Maid season 2. I have not. So, Gil, to answer your question, I've watched season 1. I watched season 1 on my own time when it came out. I will probably put Dragon Maid season 2 on a future poll at some point and watch it. I felt Dragon Maid was okay. It's fine. It was cute. It may be cute to watch over again and then dive into the other season. That might be a good idea. I have heard of Euphonium. Yeah. And Kiwani does it. Interesting. I didn't know that Euphonium. I know Semblance of Sanity is reacting to it right now, but I haven't watched it because I haven't seen it yet. So I might have to include that on there. That's really cool. BK1, that's good to know. Blue Period. So Blue Period was on my poll with Link Click and it got second place, Ray. So Blue Period is going to be on a future poll. Definitely. I definitely eventually want to watch Blue Period for sure. Beyond the Boundary. Ooh, I'll have to write that one down too. And so, yeah, Banana Fish. Banana Fish is my favorite anime, I think, but it will leave you broken. That is for sure. Absolutely. So I'll definitely have to research some more Kiwani shows to include on future polls. Sarune is definitely gonna be one of them. I'm gonna react to the free movies when they come out. That's like a given. It's done. Like there's no question I'm gonna react to the free movies that Kiwani does. There's 2 more films with that. Yeah, the A-Lot. Interesting. Cool. But yeah, I loved Violet Evergarden. It was great. And so I'm definitely going to hopefully have more Kiwani shows on the polls in the future by and by. But y'all, this has been so much fun. I didn't know how long I was going to talk about Violet Evergarden. I'm like, maybe I'll talk for an hour about it, or maybe 2 hours. And here we are at like 2 hours and 30 minutes. But it's so good. And so the problem is there's too many anime out there and not enough time, but I'll eventually get to them. Oh, okay. So nuclear, before I got Josie, the tiger and the fish. Is that film Kiwani or is it a different studio? Because I definitely want to react to it eventually when that film gets the English subs out. But yeah, that one's definitely going on the list, nuclear. So I'm glad you bring that up. But yeah, you should write me a letter. Here's the thing. I know that not everybody can afford Patreon, and that's totally fine. There's a lot of reactors that I can't afford the Patreon for, so I don't get on the Patreon for them. But I still watch their stuff. I'm totally fine if y'all can support me through YouTube, whatever. But if y'all, I love getting letters. So if y'all write me a letter, absolutely. It might be Bones. Interesting. Okay. Thanks, Nuclear. But yeah, you all are welcome to write me a letter anytime. Absolutely. I would love that. So yeah, it can be whatever, even if it's just like, this series has made me want to write letters so badly. So if y'all ever send me a letter, sure, absolutely. I've got a PO box. It's always in my descriptions. So I check it every week. So yeah, if y'all ever sent me a letter, that would be awesome. But no pressure, obviously, at all. I feel like when we comment on videos in the comment section, it's kind of like writing a letter anyway. The whole message of Violet Evergarden is about communication and connecting with one another. And so I feel like even that's my favorite part about this channel is that reading your comments and commenting back, that's a way that we all connect to one another to talk about these shows. And it's always so exciting and I love it. So any type of comment is a good thing, right? But yeah, I'm so glad I got to talk to y'all about this series. It has been so much fun. I'm definitely going to go research some more Kiwani shows to hopefully have in future polls. But yeah, movie coming out next week, movie 2 reaction, and then link click after that. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I'm pretty excited. So I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Thursday or Friday, depending on your time zone. Thank you guys for spending 2.5 hours with me talking about this show. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. It has been a journey, but you know what? I've rewatched movie 2 4 times now. I'm going to rewatch it a 5th time or more. So now I get to go bombard Twitter with all of the Violet Evergarden stuff. I get to go research all the things and spread it to the Discord. It's exciting. So I'm looking forward to that and rewatching the series now that I've fully gotten through it, because I know it's going to be one of those series I rewatch. Definitely. So in the meantime, thank you guys so much for joining the chat. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll see y'all in the comments section next week for movie 2, right? So in the meantime, thank you all so much. It's been a lot of fun. Have a great day. And I'll see y'all next week with the movie comments there. All right. Bye, everybody. See ya.